Hey, my name is Kaylee. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This is Read Rant Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. I give you a beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown of a book that you guys voted for. Today I'm going back in the catalog a little bit and I'm reviewing a book that you guys voted for a couple of weeks ago now, and that is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. Currently on Goodreads, 4.39 with 65,000 ratings. This book was published in October of 2024, has 430 pages. I'm going to read you the book description real quick, and then we'll talk about some trigger warnings, we'll talk about some other disclaimers, and we'll get the ball rolling, okay? Magic has made the city of Tyran an industrial utopia, but magic has a cost, and the collectors have come calling. An orphan since age 4, Shona has always had more to prove than her fellow students. For 20 years, she has devoted every waking moment to the study of magic, fueled by a mad desire to achieve the impossible, to be the first woman ever admitted to the high magistry. When she finally claws her way up the ranks to become a high mage, however, she finds that her challenge has just begun. Her new colleagues will stop at nothing to let her know that she is unwelcome, beginning with giving her a janitor instead of a qualified lab assistant. What neither Shona nor her peers realize is that her assistant was once more than a janitor. Before he mopped floors for the mages, 10 years have passed since he survived the perilous crossing that killed his family. But working for a high mage, he sees the opportunity to finally understand the forces that decimated his tribe, drove him from his homeland, and keep the Tyrannish in power. Through their fictitious relationship, mage and outsider uncover an ancient secret that could change the course of magic forever, if it doesn't get them killed first. Shona has defined her life by the pursuit of truth, but how much is one truth worth with the fate of civilization in the balance? A standalone, dark academia brimming with mystery, tragedy, and the damning echoes of the past. Content warnings for gore, sexual assault, and suicidal ideation. If you could not tell by my enthusiasm, absolutely loved this book. This was my second 5-star read of the year so far. It was so good. So this is definitely going to be more of like a I loved this book so much, you have to hear about it type of rant review. This isn't going to be like me critiquing it. Obviously, like I'll point stuff out if there's like issues or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and I'll make commentary throughout it. But this isn't one of the normal, tearing something apart type video. So if that is the type of video you want, I'll have one of those next week. This one is just me gushing and being happy about being a reader, okay? Yes, the content warnings, take those very, very seriously. It is incredibly detailed. There's a lot of gore in this. The essay scene was incredibly triggering, and the ideation aspect of it spans over a couple of chapters and is also very detailed and like, whoa, heavy, right? But really well done. Now, onto the actual book itself. So chapter 1 opens and we are immediately introduced to some crazy trauma. Toml, it's Thomil, and also a lot of these words are difficult to say, and so I'm going to pronounce them a certain way. I'm probably wrong in how I'm pronouncing things. If you've seen my other videos, it's nothing new. Don't correct me. I don't care. If you comment about it, it's too late for me to fix it, and like, it is what it is, right? So just acknowledging that up front, okay? So we open our book with Toml, and he is with his... Toml? I need to commit to one of them. I'm going to say it's like Thomas, so we're going to say Toml. He is... Sorry, this is not funny at all. He is with his tribe. They're the Caldone people, and they are in the middle of prepping to cross this frozen lake to get into this city of Tyran that has a like magical barrier around it. So outside of the city, it is the dead of winter. It is freezing cold. Everybody's dying off. There's a thing called the Blight, which is this light thing that just randomly happens and just like obliterates a person. It's like this light absorbs this person and their body like comes entirely apart, like layers of their body just like disintegrating and like spinning out of them. Horrific descriptions of what happens to people when they get touched by the Blight. And so whenever they have to cross this frozen lake, that's what they're worried about. This is a notorious crossing area where if you go, like, you are going to get got by said Blight, but they don't have a choice. And so the entirety of his clan, There's like 20 or 30 of them, I believe, are trying to run across this as fast as humanly possible. They're going to go as a group with the hope, understanding that the blight will like pick off onesie twosie people, but it won't get like a whole group of them. So they're going across. The second that their feet touch the ice, somebody is taken by the blight. That person's family stays back with them. They get taken. They are just running, screaming, running. He watches all of his family members, all of his like tribe members, piece by piece, one after the other, just get taken. His sister, it happens to her as they're running like right next to each other. And so the sister like pretty much throws her daughter, his niece, like Toml's niece, to him. And she has this like wicked scar on her face from getting touched by the blight, but she didn't get all consumed by it. But he just watched his sister die, watched every single person. At the very, very last second, the ice starts to break and he barely crosses into this light barrier and he is now protected in the city. I said, hello? Can we like introduce each other first? Like, can I get a, like, hello? How are you? Do we not believe in that anymore? What a wild introduction to a book, right? So immediately, I'm hooked. I'm in it, dude. I'm like, what the hell happens now, right? We literally just watched so many people die. And the second that he gets over this, you would think it would be like roses, right? Everything is so great. Even though he lost his entire family, he at least survived. He and his baby niece, I believe she was like 4 years old at the time, they make it, right? And he is like trying to catch his breath. He's trying to, I don't know, maybe get over the shock a little bit of everything that just happened. And also his lungs are burning so badly because of how bad the winter is outside. Like his lungs are literally on fire right now. And so he's like on all fours, heaving on the ground. His niece is like passed out. Like he doesn't know if she's actually alive or not at this point. And he is just like heaving in these security guard guys. They're the border guards is what they call them. They like, obviously, they go around the border of this like city light barrier protection thing. The border guards kick him. They're like, hey, like you POS, if you can't talk or if you can't work, like if you're not worth working, like we're going to throw you back out there. And so eventually he is able to like say a word, or he like grabs the guard's leg really hard to prove that he has hand strength, even though he can't speak. And he also doesn't speak very much of their language. Like he has his own, obviously like his tribe had their own language, and he learned a couple of words, and he's just trying to, prove to them that he is worth staying. And then they're like this kid's about to die anyway, like we might as well just throw them out too. The very last second, like as they're about to kind of like finish the niece off, he says that it's his daughter. The Tyranish people are very honoring of family stuff, and so they're not going to off her, and they're not going to send her to one of the camps. They're going to keep her with him. So that's good. At least there's some type of silver lining, I guess, but like it is a absolutely horrific greeting after this horrific experience that they just went through, right? Like there is like it's not like a salvation moment. It is like from one hell to another. What's also really interesting about this book is each of the chapters ends with a quote or a citation. Typically it is a citation of one of their, it's either a newspaper article, some type of commentary, or it'll be a verse from their like Bible, or from their like laws and constitutions and rulings and all of this other stuff. And it's such interesting lore just to kind of sprinkle in there that kind of sets the scene for what happens next, or provides the societal context for what we just read in that chapter. Like it is so well fleshed out and so incredibly interesting. And so we go from that like insanity, right? And then in chapter 2, we meet Shona. Shona is in her mid-20s, and she is, kind of like we talked about in the book description, she is a mage who is trying against all odds to become a high mage. So in order to do so, she has been practicing magic, practicing spells, learning all this stuff forever, ever, her entire life. She has dedicated everything in her to attain this goal. And so in order to get there, in order to become a high mage, there's this final test that you have to take. And you have to like prove your worth pretty much. We open our book with her going to experience this test. So it's her, there's like 7 guys also that she had like kind of grown up with and gone through schooling and training and everything with. And they have the current high mages and the arch mages, like the really, really big guy that's in charge of everything, administering this exam. And it's open to the public. So like the public will be there watching them cast spells. And it's not cast spells like, you know, woo woo, I'm just thinking of it and something happens. It's like a typewriter. It's called a spellograph, and they have to type in what their spell is and type in the coordinates. And it read like coding to me, or like programming almost, and then it makes stuff happen. Again, so cool. So that's what this chapter is laying the context of, is her preparing to go to this exam, this test thing, right? Immediately, we find out how driven she is, how dedicated she is, right? We learned in the book description that she is an orphan. Her mother died when she was 4 years old, and her father abandoned her. Her father, like literally the day after the mom died, took her to her aunt's house, the mom's sister's house, and dropped her off. Said, here you go. You can deal with her. She's not mine. Okay, we'll get to it. We'll visit that commentary later. But she has been raised by her aunt and her older cousin, who are so incredibly supportive and loving of her. And she has a really, really not even a close relationship with them, because she doesn't really get close to anybody, because she is so like engrossed in her work, and all she cares about is magic. She doesn't care about relationships or relationship building or even really maintaining the relationship with her aunt and her cousin. She is so just focused and driven for this like one goal. This has been her entire life, right? Which I related to very heavily, right? Hey, I'm a Capricorn. I'm right there, dude. That's me. And also, it felt like a little bit of autism rep there with this like obsession, or like at least some type of not neurotypical behavior. I felt like that was some good representation. And yeah, so anyway, her and her cousin hop on the train to go to the other side of the city to go to this exam thing, and they're going together. And once they get on campus and they're going into the building, founding mage Leon's words glinted in polished alchemic gold above the doors. To Tyrion, the bounty of the other realm, to my mages, all its power. May you ever be good stewards to this bright haven in a world of darkness. Carved below that was Fane the First's motto and mission statement of the university. Truth over delusion, growth over comfort, God over all. This is an incredibly religious city, right? It's religiously based. When they get into the actual hall right before they test, we also learned that they only allow one woman every 10 years to take this exam to become a high mage. So far, every woman has failed it, and really it's kind of like they do it to prove that women are inadequate, that women can't do magic and they shouldn't be involved in this. And so they like, you know, have a woman randomly participate in this every now and then just to prove how worthless women are. It is very much like a misogynistic driven society. Obviously they treat the Quen is what they're called. The outsiders, the blighters is also the other name for it. All of the people outside of Tyrion, like Toml, that cross over into Tyrion to try and find safety, they are like forced to live in these slums and given these terrible jobs and treated like second-class citizens. Like, it is incredibly terrible. Need I say more? Like, yeah. And then you have all these like really powerful, like white men that run everything and just look down on everybody who's not a fellow white man. So we're introduced to that idea immediately off the bat. So Archmage Brigham is her mentor. He's like the only guy who is even semi-decent. He has always helped her out, always believed in her, and he is so incredibly excited for her to get this exam over with so she can become the first female high mage. So he talks her off the ledge a little bit. She's freaking out before this whole thing. He gives her a little bit of a pep talk, right, where immediately we establish the relationship between the two of them and how supportive he is. And he is married to his work. Like, he does not have an outside relationship. He doesn't have like a wife or kids or anything. And obviously Shona does not have a father. And so he kind of stepped in as almost like a father figure to her. And she's kind of like a pseudo daughter relationship between the two of them. Not gonna front, I was really scared it was gonna turn into like something inappropriate between them, or he was gonna be a creepy guy, but no, he's actually just like father figure stuff. Very kind, actually. Gives her the pep talk. he goes up to his seat because he's one of the judges, and then she goes down to be a participant and watch everything that goes on. And so we get this very detailed description of what each of the mages are tasked with doing. There's a number of tasks, like a series of them that they have to go through. They go down into this little middle open area. All that's there is the table, the spellograph, and then the judges watching them. And the judges will like manifest or make whatever item that the mage needs. So some of the things, for example, is there's like a bowl of pieces of paper, and they have to like light each of the papers individually and like set them on fire. There's something about like a pine cone, like picking up a pine cone. One about pulling energy from the other realm to do XYZ, and just challenging them on how they're writing their spells and how, you know, they're conducting all of these things. One of them, they had to like pick something up off of the ground, or they had to move something across the desk at like a slow rate of speed, etc., etc. Really fancy, cool stuff. When it gets to her, she's the very last, I don't want to say contestant, but that's kind of what it feels like. She's the very last one to take the exam. And of course, as you would imagine, they give her the most difficult questions possible because, God forbid, they do anything else, right? So one of the tasks she has is she has to create a bomb that when thrown in the air above 15 feet explodes, and she can't use energy from the reserve, which is like where they get the base of a lot of their magic, and kind of like the day-to-day magic operations around the city comes from the reserve. So she has to find the coordinates to get other energy from the other realm and then create this whole thing, and it's very, very complicated, very convoluted, but she does great. They just keep giving her more and more stuff, to the point that one of the guys on the council is like, hey, we're reaching the limit of what we can ask her to do. We only have one more thing, so you guys are getting a little extra. And of course, the final task comes from a guy whose son is competing against her to become a high mage, because, you know, he's bad at it. He absolutely failed his exam, but he's going to get grandfathered in because nepotism, and that's just how the world works. So he, trying to prove a point about his son being a failure, is like trying to make her fail, which, okay, weird. He like summons this giant cauldron, like industrial sized cauldron, in front of her, and he says, levitate this in the air, levitate this like 15 feet in the air and hold it there. So she goes up to it, she tries to push it, she has no idea how heavy it is. It just like, it doesn't even budge when she's putting her entire weight against it. So she goes through, she types out all of her calculations, puts it in there that the cauldron is 5,000 pounds. When she hits enter and the spell starts to happen, the cauldron flies up into the air, like straight to the ceiling. On the ceiling, there is a mural of all of the like founding fathers of Tyrion. The one who got smashed in the face is Stravos. We'll talk about him later. Him and his magic plays a very large role in this, right? So it's ironic that the one that gets destroyed is also the one that is like a key thing to this book. Cauldron falls back down. Everybody's laughing at her, and she immediately is like, okay, so 5,000 was definitely too much. It's got to be like a 1,000 pounds based off of, you know, the crazy calculations in her brain. So she goes back up to the machine and she's retyping, and the council that's judging her is like yelling at her. They're like, we didn't give you permission to continue working. Step away from that spellograph right now. What do you think you're doing? Just like completely just screaming at her. And they're like, if you touch that or if you finish that spell you're writing, you're failing. Like, we're going to fail you instantly for being insubordinate. And she hits enter right after they say this, and the cauldron raises back up and levitates in the air, and then she walks away. But she walks away and starts to freak out, realizing that like, yeah, I might have done it, yeah, I might have done the prompt, but I also went against their wording, and so I have failed. She's like, I have completely failed. I'm not going to be a high mage, and like, I've ruined all of this for every woman going forward, which isn't the real motivation. So this is something that she will experience through the life of this book, is her ego. To be the first woman high mage, which obviously is Shona's one goal in life, and she's handed this opportunity to become it. And you have this like fundamental battle, and she had this fundamental battle within herself of, am I doing this to better women and to be an example and be a role model and prove that like women are good enough to be in these spaces, or am I doing it because I want respect, because I want them to know that I should be in these spaces? And it's more of like proving herself rather than like proving the gender or being in support of like changing the world for women versus just like making a name for herself. And this, you know, inner versus outer ideas and like drives. Like regardless though, in this moment, realizing that she has just ruined any chance that she had at being a high mage, she runs away, and she runs to the bathroom to go and cry because she refuses to cry in front of anybody, especially the boys, the men that she just was in this competition with. They were supposed to go back into this back room and like hang out for a while the council had their discussion about who was going to get like promoted basically, or who was going to be awarded this honor. So they were supposed to wait in this waiting room. She bails on that idea so she can go and cry in the bathroom. Her cousin comes in and it helps her, and you know, they have a little cry sesh about it all, and it's very cute. Eventually, this secretary woman comes in and she's banging on the door and she's like, Shona, they're looking for you. Archmage Brigham wants you, like you have to come. And she's like, okay. She gets herself together, steps out the door, and Brigham is right there waiting for her. And he says, you've done it. You've done it. You did it. You did it. And she's like, I don't understand. What's not to understand, my child? I should be disqualified. I broke the ceiling. Did you ever? Don't worry. The maids have almost got the mess cleared up as we speak, and those crusty murals needed a touching up anyway. But I didn't follow Archmage Duris's instructions. Oh, stuff Duris. What? Excuse my language, but Duris doesn't actually have the authority to end an applicant's examination. He likes to throw tantrums, yes, but only the Archmage Supreme can call an end to an examination. You were right to hold your ground and ignore him. Never forget how to do that, Shona. Do what, sir? Know your rights, know your spells, and press on past the detractors, or through them if you must. It is a skill that you will need over and over again in the High Magistry. And on their way back for like the formal declaration of it all, he tells her about how busy she's going to be because sourcing proposals will be presented at the next meeting of the High Magistry. So they're wanting to expand the barrier of Tyrion, right? So they have their little circle around it now. They're wanting it to go out a little bit further to support a growing population. But obviously sourcing, like that's going to require a lot, like a ridiculous amount of magic to be able to do that. And currently the sourcing and whatnot that they're using is really just used to maintain the city. So the sorcerers, it's a type of mage, is going to have to get really, really creative and figure out like some different spell webs and sourcing webs and how are we going to do all of this like crazy stuff to make this thing happen. And so it's going to be the first task of the new high mages to figure out what the plan will be and then present it at the next high magistry meeting in a month. And then at said meeting, they'll make a decision and then, you know, kind of move on with this barrier expansion project. And so this is Shona's first chance to really like prove herself and her abilities and whatnot. And so this is going to be the main focus for the book. Like, is this project? He tells her as much. He's like, I know that you can do it. Like, what did I tell you? Like, this is your time. Like, this is your time to shine. Shona's heart filled to bursting. Archmage Brigham, damn it. Now after everything, she was going to cry. I don't know what to say. Thank you for this. No, my dear. Brigham held up a finger. Don't do that. Do what? Cry? Credit me or anyone else for your success. As it is, other people will try to credit me in order to tear you down. Be cold, be hard, and don't give them an inch. You understand? No matter what they say about you. And she's like, what will they say? Or like, what are they saying? And he's like, don't worry yourself about it. But obviously, I mean, you and I, hey, we live in the real world. We can imagine what's happening, right? They're saying that she's like sleeping her way to the top, basically, or like, you know, doing some type of extra favors for Brigham on the side for him to even entertain this. And she only got this position because she's a woman and there's a lady on like the city council, like political wise, that's trying to do some stuff. And so they were doing it to appease her. And just like, you know what, I don't need to explain it to you because like we live in the real world where this shit happens all the time, right? And she's like, oh yeah, about the city council, you know, the new election cycle's coming up. Like that's kind of interesting. And he makes a comment about how there won't be much change to the city council this election cycle except Amfrey losing his seat to Paramus. Turns out Paramus is her father. She hadn't spared a thought for her father in the last 20-some years. Farron, damn her, that's their name for a god, I believe. Damn her, if she was going to start now. Pushing Paramus out of her head where he belonged, she changed the subject. So her dad is this incredibly rich, well-known guy in the city who, like, immediately after abandoning her, went on to get remarried and then have, like, 3 kids that he's, like, fully invested in their life in. But, of course, they're sons. And so we'll talk about it later where she starts to reflect on this. Oh, my God. So nobody knows that this is her dad. He did absolutely everything in his power to, like, remove himself from her and have nothing to do with her, and she has never said that he is her dad. And so the chapter ends with her thinking of her new title, High Mage Frenin. High Mage Frenin. High Mage Frenin. She saw the letters on the spine of her book, and beside them, in gold, all the things she was going to be to this city. First woman of the High Magistry, pioneer of the Frenin method, the woman who expanded the barrier. And I don't know why that makes me want to tear up so badly. So chapter 4 is Shona's first day at the university of being a high mage, and she is so incredibly excited. When she's leaving the house in the morning, her aunt makes a comment about how she needs to not take work so seriously, or like, hopefully now that she's, a high mage, she'll be able to meet like a good man, and, I want little grandnieces and nephews. All the talent you have, you must pass it on. As if Shona had cultivated her talent so some man could put his name on it and his sons could reap the benefits that she hadn't enjoyed. High mages at the university, just like general context for you, right? These are the brainiacs that do all the magic to keep the city running. It's magic that powers their lights. It's magics that starts their car or moves the train across the city all the time, or does like literally any doors opening. It's all magic. Like it is essentially their electricity. And so they're very like highly regarded people because they're like kind of the backbone brainiacs that are keeping the city functioning and going, right? And so all of the high mages, once you reach this like incredibly difficult rank, you get a white robe so everybody knows who you are and knows that you mean business. She immediately makes the decision that she doesn't want to wear it in public because she already gets enough weird looks just in general at the university wearing it. And so she just doesn't want people to give her a hard time, which is so incredibly sad. The other guys pretty much live in their robes because it's like a flex thing, but she just keeps it a secret. It like actually genuinely breaks my heart. But on this first day, she's going in and one of the neighbor girls recognizes her and asks her to sign her book. And she's like, oh, well, you don't want my signature. Like, I'll get, like Archmage Brigham to sign this for you. Don't worry, I'll bring it back to you. And she's not like giving herself credit. She worked so hard for this goal, making history immediately, and then like not taking it seriously for herself. And this is the most like accurate representation of overachiever perfectionist that I have ever seen in a book, where like, and I'm so guilty of this personally, where I will grind so hard to like reach certain goals and to do these like crazy things and attain these objectively kind of like outlandish, very, very difficult things. And then the second that it happens for me, I'm like, okay, cool, and I move on to the next thing, because it's like, yeah, obviously I did that. I said that I would, so I got it done. Like, what is there to celebrate? Like, of course it was going to happen. Like, there's never any glory in any of these achievements. It's just, yeah, duh. What else would I have done? And it's like, oh, to see it in a book like this hurt me so bad. And then also in general, just to note too, I'm a woman in STEM, and then my workplace is even worse than that, where I'm like literally one of maybe 10 women out of like a couple hundred. Like, I am oftentimes the only woman in a room, if not maybe like 1 or 2 other women are in rooms, and maybe one of us at the actual table where things are happening, right? Oh, it's all just a bunch of old white men. It's literally this book. And the politics and the bureaucracy and the craziness that happens, and like her just trying to be taken seriously as a woman, and a young woman at that, is just like so relatable in such a difficult way. And obviously there's a race aspect that'll come in a little bit later too that we'll talk about, that is just it's difficult to read in a good way. Sorry for ranting. So she takes this girl's book because she doesn't want to sign it, because she doesn't think that she's good enough or that this is like meaningful enough. and she gets on the train and she goes to the university. In the main building, there are 4 floors, and the 4th floor is exclusively reserved for high mages. This is the first time that she's ever been up there. First time she's ever gotten access. Wearing this little robe around the university, everybody's a lot more respectful. Nobody really looks at her. Like everybody, well, if they do, it's more of like, oh my God, this is so crazy. Whoa, that's the first woman mage, right? She gets up to the 4th floor. Again, first time being there, has no idea where anything is, can't find anything, nothing is labeled, like there's no signage anywhere because again, you should only be up there if you work there. So they're not going to have like signs everywhere because if you're supposed to be there, you should know where you're going. She ends up running into a janitor and he's very, very polite, very, very nice. He gives her some directions. She tries to follow them and gets lost. And then he comes up and he's like, hey, like, do you want me to walk you like where you need to go? She's like, oh yeah, that would be so wonderful. Please. Is walking her around, takes her up to her office. When they turn the corner, they turn the hall. It is the new mages, like all have their labs are all like next to each other. So her and the new guy are directly across the hall from each other. And then the third new guy is at the end of the hall. And Rant is the one who's at the end of the hall. And the way I want to beat this man, dude, he makes a comment to her about all of his lab assistants and all of the other high mages lab assistants. And he says, yeah, sorry, we just don't have any for you. You're just going to have to do it all by yourself. Keep in mind, Rant has 4 lab assistants. But he's like, yeah, I mean, it'd be kind of weird though, right? Like you don't want like a man taking directions from you. Like I don't think we won't be able to find anybody who would be willing to do that, to be like, essentially, how's this said? It would embarrass them to take directions from a woman regardless of her talent. And so he says, hey, blighter. Shona winced at the word, which had always seemed like an awful thing to call the people from beyond the barrier, even if they had brought blight on themselves. It was a shade too cruel for her taste. Sir, said a quiet voice. And that was when Shona realized that the janitor had stayed there at her shoulder. Lady Mage has a new job for you. Rant, one of the other mages started. His smile widened. You're being promoted to mage's assistant. And so she takes it in grace. She says, okay, come on, Tom. She's calling him Tommy at this point. That's how he introduced it. That's like his like whitewashed name that he gives these people. So she's like, okay, fine. You know what? Whatever. Come on, Tommy. Like, come to my lab with me. They go in there. She shuts the door behind her and is taking a bit of a breather. And he's like, hey, ma'am, sorry. Like, I can get out of here if you want me to. Like, obviously their prank is over now. And she's like, shut up. Like, I don't want to acknowledge it. I don't want to acknowledge the prank. Like, we're actually going to have to embrace this. Like, we are committing to the bit at this point. But she makes one comment which like so broke my heart. Not a comment, she's thinking this. What hurt was that the high magistry was supposed to be a place of pure intellect. If there was anywhere in the world where her sex shouldn't matter, her class shouldn't matter, it should have been here. But that had been a stupid assumption, hadn't it? Brigham had warned her that this would happen. Some naive part of her just hadn't been able to accept it. And so in chapter 5, we are committing to the bit. She has Tommy sit down. And then she's like, okay, well, can you read? He says, yes. He starts sorting books for her. And then she's like, okay, well, let's give you a lesson because you have no idea what anything is. So she starts typing some stuff out and walking him through the basics of what she does. And in the middle of her typing something, he says, I don't think I've ever seen anyone type that fast, ma'am. You've worked on this floor for a while, haven't you? You've seen other high mages typing. Not like that. Shona smiled. Well, I started behind most of them. I had to be fast to catch up. So she's explaining to him a bunch of like basic magic concepts. It was a limiting spell. So whenever you are like calling the magic from the reserve to get something done, this particular mage had put a limiting spell on it. So it's almost like you had this like huge rush of water and then it went through like this really like a straw almost, where you had this like flood, like you're trying to funnel a river through a straw is the kind of like the comparison here. And so it ended up, the straw blew up, right? Got obliterated. So they were in the middle of building this bridge and using this magic, and accident happened. The bridge collapsed. And so she's explaining this to Tommy and why this happened. So Tommy makes a comment about, he's aware of the bridge project, that he knew he was friends with a couple of the people who died. I don't remember anyone dying, Shona said, and she had read every report that the papers had published, fascinated to learn what had gone wrong. Tommy gave a shrug that was somehow the saddest thing that Shona had ever seen. They were only Quen. Oh. Shona realized that the newspapers wouldn't have publicized the death of a couple of Quen workers, not if the university was pressuring them to minimize the incident. That was what they had called it. An incident. Not a tragedy. Not criminal negligence by senior mages who should have known better. So she goes through this whole thing. They literally spend all day going through these lessons, and he is a very engaged student. He's absorbing everything that she's giving, and he's, asking great questions back to her, very involved. Toward the end of the night, they hear some people out in the hallway. Renthorn and the other mages are going to the new mage across the hall and asking him for a drink. They said, "Hey man, we got to buy you a drink to celebrate your first day here. Like, this is so exciting. Like, let's go drinking." And they peer into her room. Her door was open now. They peer into it, and then they just keep walking and don't invite her. So her and Tommy continue to talk a little bit more back and forth. He goes to leave, and he's on his way out, and he puts his hand on the door frame. He kind of hits it with his knuckle, and he's and he turns back and looks at her. The Quen's steadily cold stare had broken for the first time. Cast down in awkwardness, he examined his knuckles for a moment. "Could I buy you a drink?" The question struck her dumb where she sat, and for a moment all she could do was stare at the Quen with her mouth partway open. I understand," Tommy said. "It's beneath you. I just thought it seemed to me like someone should buy you a drink." In spite of herself, Shona felt a smile turn her lips. Tommy was right. Someone should buy her a drink, damn it. It just shouldn't be the janitor. And so she wants to offer to buy him a drink in return, because obviously she can afford it, and also it's just kind of weird for a Quen to be buying a Tyranish woman a drink. It's just kind of weird. But then she's like, that's also disrespectful. And to offer to buy him something, this is a really weird kind of power dynamic that's happening between the two of us. So she says, "I'll buy me a drink and you buy you a drink, and we'll drink to each other's promotions side by side. How does that sound?" Light flickered back into that stoic expression. "Are you serious? You need to stop asking me that. I'm not much of a joker." "Understood, ma'am. I just thought you might not want to be seen out with a Quen." "Well, you're the only person in this place who hasn't spat in my face today. Why would I want to drink with anyone else?" Before they left the laboratory, Shona's hands curled into the white robe that she had worked for 20 years to earn. After a moment of consideration, she shed the garment and hung it by the door. Maybe she shouldn't have. Other high mages wore their white wherever they went, enjoying the attention and deference that people afforded them. But thus far, people didn't react to Shona's robes with the same deference. Mostly, they gawked like she was a circus attraction, and after a frustrating day at work, that was the last thing that she wanted. It's so sad. So they end up going to this bar that's kind of on the outskirts. So there's again, there's the city, and then there's the outskirts, and then there's kind of this the Quen populated area where it's all high-rise apartments, and it's all where all the factories are located at, and just not, I'm gonna say nicest neighborhood, because that's the way that it's portrayed in the book. She was growing up being told not to go to that quarter, to that area of the city, because she would inevitably get mugged, right? There's again some deeply heavy racist stuff going on here. And then she lives over on this other part of town where it's a mixed neighborhood where it's Quen and Tyranish people live together. Not together, but they have houses next to each other, and they all work together at these other establishments. But mostly the Quen people are forced to work in factories or be janitors and be these the blue collar jobs are pretty much all forced upon the Quen to work. And so again, just kind of a weird dynamic for them to be hanging out and to be seen together. And so they end up going to a bar that is owned by a Quen, and it's kind of on the other side of town where people wouldn't recognize her, maybe, possibly, or nobody would kind of bat an eye about them at the bar together. So they go there. He's friends with the owner, or with the bartender owner guy, and tells him in his clunky language about who she is, and introduces her to the bartender guy. And he says, "In that case, you drink for free, milady." "What?" Shona said, but the man had already moved away to prepare their drinks, taps flaring at his touch to pour beer into fresh glasses. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Tommy said, "that you're the first female high mage in Tyran. Don't worry," he added, registering her anxiety. "He's not going to make a scene about it." The bartender comes over and she's like, no, let me pay for it. And the bartender says, no, Midra, you and all of your friends, they drink for free under this roof. And she's like, "What did you call me?" "Easy, high mage," Tommy said. "It's a nice word." He's honored to serve free drinks to the new high mage that everyone's talking about. And I will just note, we will come back to what that word means later, okay? They they're drinking, they're hanging out, they're having some conversations, and he makes a comment about like, you know, why does she want to do magic? Like if doing this, if being a mage is just resulting in her being bullied by her peers and treated so poorly, he's like, why didn't you do like the normal stuff that Tyrion women do? Like, why are you going out of your way to kind of expose yourself to these like horrible people? And she says, there's no glory in homemaking or teaching, and I'm lousy at those things anyway. I'm sure that's not true, ma'am. He had to say that to be polite. But it is. All women's work entails caring for people, and I'm terrible with people. Magic is the one area where I can shut myself in a room with my books and my thoughts and come out more powerful than I went in. It doesn't matter how big or strong or pretty or charismatic you are in magic. It doesn't matter how much people like you. With my fingers on the keys of a spellograph, if I can just think hard enough, I'm the most powerful person in the world. That's something a woman just isn't going to get anywhere else. She continues to get obliterated. Like, she is so drunk she can't even walk. And so Tommy, I think part of that night, that conversation at the bar, he tells her his actual name being Toml, tells her how to pronounce it. Everything's good. So he's now Toml. We're over the whole Tommy thing. We're over this whole BS. They're like friends now, right? And so he ends up walking her back to the university. The train ride is really, really long. And so during the week, she's just going to sleep in her lab. And then on the weekend, she'll go back to her aunt's house. But it's nothing new for her. She usually slept in the labs anyway. So he walks her there, right? In chapter 6, she wakes up in the morning and has a realization that made her smile. Despite the splintering headache, she had made a friend. Has that ever happened before? She wondered as she rolled from her cot and groped for the light conduit. Maybe not since primary school. Maybe not since her mother died. And she realizes also that he carried her. Like, she's kind of having these like fuzzy memories of like being against his chest and how nice that he smelled as he like carried her up the stairs and like to her lab. Oh my God, he's a gentleman. And we're back to magic learning and her giving lessons to him about everything that's going on. And she's explaining the other realm and how to access it and how you go through these coordinates. And this is where you like try and pluck energy from. And there's certain areas that are like known to have a lot of energy. And then there's also the forbidden coordinates, which are off limits for any siphoning ever. It's called siphoning when you're like pulling the energy from the other realm. Off limits for any siphoning ever. That rule was written into the Leonid. So not just Fane in the first supplement's religious guidelines, but in the founding texts by Leon himself. The preachers are always saying, your God-gifted Tyrion, all the fruits of his garden, Toml said. Isn't it odd then for some of the all to be withheld? The unbreakable rules of magic are unbreakable for a reason. You know the reason then? Toml asked. God's reasons aren't really up for questioning, but that said, when it comes to the forbidden coordinates, I think Tyrion learned everything that it needed to know, arguably more than anyone needed to know, from High Mage Sabrin. Who's High Mage Sabrin, you ask? Well, he was the first and only high mage ever sentenced to death. There has to be a consensus vote among the high magistracy, not just the council, but all 100 practicing mages to deliver a death sentence. So it's not something that you see every day or even every century. He had used the forbidden coordinates, kill his, I believe it was fellow mages. Like, he was out here just like murdering folks, and had been using the forbidden coordinates to do so. Okay, so now everybody's all scared of them, or has like the additional reasoning for not using them. Her mentor Brigham, he comes over and pays her a little visit and says hello, and you know, Toml makes them some tea, they have a little bit of a chat, and then when he leaves, Toml asks who he is. Like, is that the guy that has like, does he make clothes? Like, he's in the textile stuff, isn't he? And she says, he is the textile industry in Tyrion. The dress I'm wearing, my robes, your work clothes, all these papers, every fiber of them started with the experiments in Brigham's lab and came out of his factories. I see. Something in Toml's inscrutable expression had changed subtly, darkening. What is it? Nothing, High Mage, he said, and when Shona continued to look at him expectantly, he sighed. A woman I courted a while ago. She worked in one of your archmage's factories. Oh. Shona faltered, immediately regretting her decision to press the matter. One of the comments that Brigham had made when he was in there was how he's amazed that she has an assistant. Like, he's like, I'm actually really surprised that you're keeping, you know, this guy around helping you out. Like, I thought you usually like working by yourself. And she's like, yeah, I do, but it's fine. We're making it work. And so after Brigham left and everything, Toml brings it back up and he's like, hey, so like, would you rather be alone? Like, do you want me here? Like, why, what's happening with this like situation? Do I have a job? Am I going to keep my job or not? And she says, you're different. Shona said after a moment, talking to you is different. She wouldn't have been so forward with her thoughts, but she was trying to parse them as she spoke. You listen. And it was only as Shona said the words aloud that she realized this was something that she had never had before. A man who listened for what she was actually saying, not just for what he wanted to hear. I mean, you really listen. You're my boss, Toml said, and you're teaching me something important. What else would I be doing? I guess I'm just surprised that you're able to keep up, given all my weird quirks and tangents. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Quen in this city who can't bend to tyrannish quirks, Toml said. Shona felt her brow furrow. What do you mean? Quen who can't work a job, whatever the job, don't get to live. My, it's true what they say about you people being melodramatic. Toml broke eye contact, and Shona felt oddly as if she had lost hold of something. Bright energy eluding her fingers on the keys. Sorry, ma'am. Forget I said anything. I'll just listen. The next 2 weeks she spends with Toml exclusively working on the spell web for this energy sourcing thing for the big project, right? For the barrier expansion thing. And as she's going through and she's explaining to him that, you know, there's things that I'm good at that Renthorn is better at, and it'll probably be a wash in the end, or they're going to like force us to work together and combine ideas. She's like, so this is incredibly important that I get absolutely everything as perfect as possible so that they don't end up putting his name on it, right? In the middle of her working on these spell webs and whatnot, and he's like reading quietly in the corner so she can like deep dive spiral into this work, there's an explosion. The lab down the hall from hers had this crazy explosion. It broke the windows in her lab. Everything kind of fell over. There's some weird, like just smoke like coming out of the hallway. They like rush out there. Everybody's like, oh, I thought it was you. No, I thought it was you. Everybody thought it was Shona, of course, because they're just a bunch of douchebags. But no, it was this other high mage guy at the end of the hall. So all of the guys make a run to go into the dust or like, you know, the smoke and whatnot to try and figure out what's going on. And they tell her to go downstairs or to stay away and like, you know, run for her safety. Grumbling in annoyance, Shona followed, not because she gave a damn what happened to Renthorn and Tanril or Halaros after the way that they had slighted her, but because she resented being treated like she was a delicate flower who had never seen an industrial accident before. So they rush into the room. The mage that's in there and then a couple of his assistants are blown back. Nobody is dead. Everybody's just kind of like shook up. And she immediately, the guys go over, you know, trying to move rubble off of people and get them all situated and make sure that they're okay. But her immediate reaction was running over to the spellograph to see what had gone wrong, like what they had messed up to cause this explosion. And she's really confused because it's an odd model of spellograph that she hasn't really seen before. It was a Macklin Splendor 55. And she's like, wait a second, where did you get this machine from? And he was like, the common supply room? Like, what do you mean? And she's like, she just kind of registers that there's like something just a little weird about what's happening, especially because the spell that was on it was like a super basic, totally normal spell that should not have had any problems whatsoever. Like it was like Mage 101 type level thing that happened. So she just kind of registers this, right? And tucks it in the back of her brain. But now his lab is out. The lab next to his is out. She has to get kicked out of hers for a couple of days while they do some like remodeling. And so Renthorn, the super D-bag mage guy, is like, hey, well, you know, Halaros and Tanril, how about you guys just come work on it with me? We can just make a little team and we can put our heads together to make this expansion project. They all agree like immediately. They're like, oh, perfect. Yeah, man, we'll use your lab. He's like, yeah, I got plenty of room in my lab for you guys and everything. And then they all turn to her. He turns to Shona and he says, well, you're welcome to join the winning team. That's kind of you, High Mage. She lied flatly, but no thank you. The other mages are like, dude, come on, be reasonable. Is there something unreasonable about wanting to do my work correctly? And so she ends up like blowing them off and she's like, Tom will come with me. And they go to leave. She headed down the steps without a look, back at the other high mages, feeling Toml fall silently into step at her shoulder. And they end up walking away and trying to find this like little quiet hidden space. She had told them that she was going off to the supply room to go and get something that had broken in her lab, but she lied to them. She's actually like detouring and going this other way. And she says, this is bad news. What's bad news? Renthorn was always planning to absorb Tanril and Mordra the 10th to his team, basically just use them as two massively overqualified assistants to execute his existing plan. And now, not only is he getting them on board early, but he's also getting Halaros. But Halaros still has his own work, doesn't he? He mentioned special assignments from Archmage Gamwin. It's the potential effect of Halaros and Tanril sharing workspace that concerns me. And she goes on this like whole thing about how if they all put their heads together that they're going to have this like crazy expansion plan and it's definitely going to win over hers. And he's like, is that so bad then? Like, if the idea of the whole point of this is to have a really well-sourced, like sourcing magic thing to make the barrier happen, like, does it matter who does it as long as it gets done? Like, it's important for Tyrion's well-being. You've made it clear many times. Why would you want them to do poorly? For that matter, why not pool your skills with theirs if the end goal is to help your people? And she says, I'm sorry, have you met me? Yes, ma'am. Something in his tone got under her skin, like he thought she was doing something wrong. Not that the opinion of the Quen should matter, but I'm not any more selfish than my colleagues. I'm just playing a more difficult game than they are. A more difficult game? Brilliant men, even moderately intelligent men in this city get handed all kinds of opportunities to succeed. Brilliant women have to fight for those opportunities, and when we get them, we have to defend them tooth and nail or they'll be snatched away. I can't work with Renthorn and the others because this barrier expansion is my project, my chance to put my mark on history, and I'm going to make sure that the spell work has my name on it if this is the last thing that I do. And he's still confused. She took a breath and tried to explain. Husbands have been putting their names on their wives' work in this city for 300 years. And if it's not a woman's husband, it's her boss, because women are limited to being apprentices and assistants in almost every profession worth doing. No woman ever gets credit for the work that she puts in, especially in academia. She never gets the glory. Well, I'm not married, I'm no one's apprentice, and I'll be damned if I let a man find some other way to take my glory away from me. Perhaps she should have stuck to saying credit instead of glory. Credit was a thing a woman could want out of a sense of justice, which was arguably virtuous. But a woman who wanted glory, that was a woman who had something really wrong with her. So they continue having a little bit of back and forth about the other mages working together and what really that would kind of mean for them and how they have to kind of shift gears. And so he's like, okay, so are we not going to the other hall thing that we were invited to for this like separate workspace area? Are we not going to like relocate the lab over there? What's the plan here? And she's like, no, we are not going to that hall. That hall is shared by the city council members. She doesn't want to be near city council people, right? Because of her father. She doesn't want anything to do with him or any chance of running into him. She can't really explain this to Toml, though. So she's just like, no, it's on principle. I just don't want to be near them. And he picks up on the throttled pain in Shona's voice, or perhaps just noted the tension in her posture. Somehow he perceived the open wound and walked on with her in silence instead of pressing the issue. Shona did not have any proper memories of her father, only a faint impression. A man in a pressed suit, a door closing behind him. She had been 4 when her mother had died, and that man sent her from his house to live with Aunt Winnie. At 6, she learned the word bastard from a school book on Adrethan Stravos. Showing Aunt Winnie the passage, she had asked, is that what I am? A bastard? It seemed like the only reason for that man in the fine suit to close that door on her. Bite your tongue, Shona, Aunt Winnie had exclaimed. Your father is an upstanding man who loved your mother very dearly. They only had eyes for each other. Then why? Shona had never quite found the voice to ask, why didn't he want me? You looked so much like her, Aunt Winnie said. He just couldn't bear it. Like most of Aunt Winnie's explanations, it assumed the best of all parties, and it did not satisfy. Paramus was a prominent enough figure for Shona to know, even at 6 years old, that he had married another woman and now had 2 sons. At 6, she was old enough to know that a man didn't deny his child his surname without malice. By the time she was 12, Shona hoped that she had been born a bastard, because if that wasn't the reason, the only other explanation was that she was a girl. It wasn't until she approached university age and her potential was clear that she began to change her mind. As an adult, Shona hoped Paramus had cast her out on the basis of her sex, because she was going to surpass every city chair and high mage's son in God's bright haven. And because Paramus had denied her his last name, she could deny him her glory. This would be her vengeance, for herself and for her mother, that she remembered only as a weak and loving smile. Oh my God. So while she's thinking all of this, it's like totally silent between her and Toml as they're walking. And she, out of nowhere, she just says, My mother did everything right. Ma'am? He asked, confused. She did everything a good middle-class Tyranish girl would. She was poised and quiet and accommodating. She dressed modestly, but well. And when an upper-class gentleman took an interest in her, she did what she was supposed to do. She indulged him, married him, loved him, served him, and sacrificed her health to give him a child. Women are always told to be kind, be forgiving, be nurturing. Shona glared down the walk ahead. As far as I know, it's never gotten them anywhere. The men of Tyrion who have the real power won't return the favor when it matters. That's why you believe the high mages of your department will take advantage of your cooperation if you give them the chance. She nodded grimly. If returning their indifference makes me a bad woman, so be it. A bad woman? Arrogant, Shona clarified bitterly. Egotistical, impure of heart. I think it's only bad if your ego's unwarranted. What? If you fail to exceed their results. If it turns out you can accomplish as much on your own as your peers do put together, then who can say that you've been unvirtuous to work alone? Who can say that you've been arrogant? I like the way you think, Quen. And their walk ends with her saying, like, how much work that they're going to have ahead of them, how they're going to be behind schedule with this whole hiccup thing with the lab situation, and he's going to have to learn some magic. He's going to have to start doing some magic to help her out. And he can't believe this. Again, like, probably one of the only, if not the only Quen who has been educated to do magic. Like, this is a huge deal that she is showing this and like having him do this actual work, especially because he is like technically he's uneducated, like he hasn't had anything. And when I say that, the whole uneducated thing, I can't explain to you. Like, there is not school for like the Quen people, for the Quen children. They literally have to go and work like multiple jobs, and it's really sad, and like we'll get into it and everything, but it is just terrible. So this is such a big deal. Him being her assistant is such a huge deal and like completely like unprecedented and everything, especially for her to be like taking him seriously and like really hearing him out about everything and like giving him these additional responsibilities. Completely unheard of. In chapter 8, they are continuing working on this whole sourcing method thing, and Shona is complaining because whenever they're doing sourcing, they do this little spell thing and it pulls up this circular window, basically, where like you're kind of looking into this field of the other realm, and then you have to pick out the light sources. But it's really, really difficult to see because it's usually like gray on gray, and it's incredibly difficult to find the light. Some energy pools are more potent than others, even though they display at identical size and brightness. Like, I assume some animals are better for meat than others. There must be a way to display the differences between those sources, the same way a hunter sees characteristics of his mark. And so she is trying to brainstorm about how difficult this is. Well, she's mostly just complaining. And in response to her complaint, Toml says, well, do you think maybe it's like that on purpose? Like, maybe looking into the other realm is dangerous, like using the forbidden coordinates. Maybe the unobstructed sight of it is too much for a human mage, like looking into the summer sun. Maybe the fog protects the eyes, like, well, actual clouds protect from the sun. Shona and him end up having like continuous back and forth. And so she says, well, it is what it is. Like, we can't change the text of this spell. It's like driven, you know, per like our religious guidance. We can't do anything differently. And he continues to kind of question it. And eventually it leads to her asking about how long that he has been in Tyrion and, you know, some of his like religious background, et cetera, because he's talking a little bit blasphemous, like being so questioning about the religious texts and the guidances and whatnot that they were given. And eventually he says that he had come to Tyrion 10 years ago. Wow. Like most Tyranish citizens, Shona had never been to the city's edge. Only barrier guards were allowed there. What was it like? The crossing? Toml's expression changed subtly, closing up. He didn't answer. Awkward silence, and eventually she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to the library. And he's like, again? Like, what the heck could you possibly need from the library? And she says, congratulations, Quen. You've convinced me to rethink Thane's rule on Leon's unalterable lines. If I can't clear that clouded glass, there's nothing left to do but break through it. Toml is reading through stuff, right? She'd given him the task. He sorted the books, and then now he's going through some of these more older texts and ancient texts that she has collected. And he's going through it and realizes that the writing in these original books, it's the same writing as the Quen use. Like, the runes that they use for these magic spells originated from the Quen. It's material and it's runes and writing and whatnot that he has seen previously, like before he came across the barrier. And so this sparks a whole discussion between the two of them that very, very quickly derails, where he explains, yes, I know for a fact this predates your people. It's not that like the Quen were inspired by the Tyran people. I don't even know how we would have gotten information from you guys out there. You guys took writing from my people. That's what I'm explaining to you. Like, your magic originated with the Quen. Obviously, she is incredibly against this idea. It goes against everything in her like belief system and like what she was grown up being told. She says, founding mage Leon was in the Venhold Mountains when God showed him his visions of Tyran and gifted him the magical revelations to make it reality. Now, Leon mostly cites direct instructions from God, but he also describes instances in which God led him to inspiration in the surrounding wilderness. There are later scholars, including High Mage Norwith, who believe Leon based the foundational principles of magic on texts that he discovered somewhere in or around the Venhold range. And Toml says, discovered? She's like, yeah? And he says, no. He says, you know that there were tribes there, right? Tribes that were then destroyed by the Blight, like in that same time frame. And you're really going to think that like he just magically got touched by God and got inspiration from these people that were using these runes and using magic and whatnot. Getting a little bit combative. And he says the Blight didn't start until year 5 pre-Tyran, after Leon saw fit to take magical knowledge from its rightful home. We Quen have a word for that. Taking ancestral items from people who aren't dead, it's called stealing. She says, founding mage Leon was not a thief. He was a great man. He wouldn't take something unless he had good reason, the greatest of all reasons in history, in fact. His inspiration laid the groundwork for all of this. He's the reason a place like this exists, safe from the Blight. He's the reason that you and I are alive to have this discussion. That's a pretty good reason, don't you think? I don't know that I believe the purity of your Leon's motives. He couldn't have taken the texts for safekeeping before he knew the Quen was in danger of Blight. But he did, Shona explained, impatient with Toml's ignorance of extremely basic religious doctrine. 10 pre-Tyran was the year that he received his visions from God, portending Blight and the need for a stronghold to guard against it. Right. What? Nothing, ma'am. It doesn't matter. Whether Leon foresaw the Blight or not, you're right. He built the city, which has kept many safe. His influence was positive. I shouldn't criticize. He goes on to explain that he doesn't believe in her God, that he obviously had to accept the teachings of the Tyran people to, fit in and not be persecuted and whatnot, but his specific people believe in other things. And ultimately, he's explaining to her that their religions have a different definition of what is right and what is wrong. Goes on to say, let's say there are 2 men who live in a city like this one, and to make the story relevant to you, let's make them high mages. The first man lives his whole life with good intentions, every decision made because he believes it aligns with his values. Yet, let's say he pressures his wife into bearing children, but it only makes her miserable. Maybe he fast tracks a building project because he is eager to see it completed. The building collapses and several of his workers die, leaving their families behind in poverty. He lends money to a friend, only for the friend to invest in a scam that ruins him. This pattern holds throughout the man's life. The majority of his well-intentioned decisions end in disasters for others. And the second man? The second man has no such good intentions. Every decision he makes is out of self-interest, spite, intent to harm, or whatever motivations his culture might deem unsavory. Yet, let's say an employee that he demotes ends up thriving in her new position and forming great friendships there. Maybe his cruelty prompts his wife to leave him and move on to a happier life with someone else. When he sabotages a rival's project, that money is allocated to a better cause that improves many lives. The majority of his actions end up changing his community for the better. All right, so when these 2 souls are weighed before the gates of heaven, who gets in? Who is the good man? The first one, obviously, even though his effect on the world was negative. Many, many lives were worse because of his actions. But he meant well. Why does that matter? Because, well, obviously it matters. Why? It just does. Right. Ma'am, for you, it just does. This is the difference in our morality. The Caldone and most beyond the barrier weigh a person by their actions and the effect they have on the world. It's not enough to have meant to do good if you don't do good. Most gods, those of the rivers, the sky, the fields, don't care for your motivations. Why should they? They should care because a man who means to do good can improve. He can do better next time. We call that vocal, and there are certain gods who care for it, just not most of them. You call what vocal? The thing that isn't good and isn't evil. The absence of goodness that still holds the potential for goodness. You don't have a word for it in Tyranish. Well, no, actually you do have the word in the literal sense. It means riverbed, or maybe ravine. Vocal is also a common Quen word for a valley or depression where a river might flow. There's no river there now, but there might have been once and there might be one day again. All living creatures have in them some good, some bad, and a lot of vocal. But vocal can't be all you are if you expect the love of your gods and fellow mortals. A ravine won't water crops or quench the dying. At some point there has to be a river, or what good can you really claim? If a man has good intentions but never manifests a river, only calamity, should he not be damned to hell? It doesn't seem fair, but it's only fair to the world that he leaves behind. This is the balance of the universe, and it is only right for the world to bring back upon him what he brought upon the world. This is why I can't worship your God or agree with the way that he measures virtue. He allows this gray space for delusion. You take a void and name it goodness, and is it so? If you can lie to yourself that you're a good person, despite all evidence, then suddenly, is it so? And then within the system, anyone with enough self-delusion could admit himself into heaven. This is nonsense. It's not nonsense, and it's not about lying, it's about intentions. I think it's about convenience. Like most mages' endeavors, it's much easier to tell yourself that you're a good person than it is to actually be one. And so she slams her hand on the desk and she's like, that's out of line. You can't talk to me this way. Like, you need to knock it off. And he shuts right up, doesn't say a word, like tucks his tail between his legs and goes on about cleaning up the laboratory. Neither of them acknowledged the power difference while they worked, but it was always there. And Shona had just used it to win their argument, which wasn't really winning at all, was it? They start to talk a little bit, and then she's like, okay, maybe it's true for some people, but it's not true for me, all right? Like, also, I need you to be honest. I can't work with you if you're not honest. And he says, I can be civil, ma'am, or I can be honest. You can't have both in their entirety. Why not? Because Quen truth isn't civilized, ma'am. Something heated in his manner. A crackle of lightning in those storm clouds. It's bloody and blighted and ugly. If you're going to let me stay, I can always be respectful or always honest. And then she's like, okay, well, like, I want you to be honest. Like, I prefer you to be honest with me always. And so he immediately stops doing dishes and turns to her, gets this like real heated, like emotional expression. And he says, okay, fine. In the bar that first night, you asked me what the word that the bartender called you, Midra. Yes? What does it mean? You Tyranish would translate it as Lady Mage, or Sorceress maybe, but across the Quen it's a term of deep respect. It's the only word we have for a high mage, someone surpassingly skilled in magic. And she's like, well, you guys have a word for that? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're that sounds weird, sorceress for high mage. And he goes on to kind of explain himself as she's trying to piece this together. And he says, the great magic practitioners of the pre-Tyran Quen were all women. And she says, hold on. A, you guys did magic? And then B, what do you mean? Like, they were all women? Like, was this at the time of the founding? And he says, no, this is long before men of any race wielded magic. Your text would call them witches. And so he goes on to explain that for most old Quen, magic was an art of protection, practiced by those with deep connection to the home and community. Those people were usually women who spent long hours tanning hides and stitching clothing, listening to their elders, surrounded by knowledge and love. Men in the Quen have always spent most seasons hunting, so deep magic isn't something that they ever had time to perfect at the highest levels. Some hunters practiced small magic they learned from their mothers, and a man who couldn't hunt due to illness or injury might develop quite advanced magic. But the really powerful magic users, the high mages of the Quen, were well-studied women, raised by women, like you. She kind of cracks a little inside, just trying to absorb everything that's happened and how foreign this sounds and how this doesn't make any sense. But thank goodness Archmage Leon took Mirdra's text and forced them off this land to found his superior civilization, right? I'm sure he knew better than they did. Female or otherwise, there can't have been Quen magic users on the level of Tyranish mages. Why would you of all people say that, ma'am? Because there were witches among the horde of the thousands when Leon drove them from the Tyran Basin, and there weren't that many founding mages at the time of the conquest, only 5. If the witches of the Quen were so powerful, how did a handful of Tyranish mages wipe them out? That I don't know. Our mages say that the Tyrannus channeled a strange type of magic, evil magic, that no Mirdra ever dreamed of practicing. But you're the expert on magic, ma'am. Yes, I am. And Tyrannus magic is not evil. Look around you. It's the greatest force of good on this blighted earth. It's the only reason that we're alive. I'm not arguing with you, High Mage. My knowledge of magic and history is obviously nothing to yours. If your founding mages thought women weren't suited to do magic, and you think they were rightly inspired by God, then I suppose I have to take your word for it. And obviously this upsets her a little bit, and so she dismisses him, and she's like, I'll see you next week. So that weekend, she goes over to Aunt Winnie's house, spending the night, kind of hanging out there, but she cannot stop thinking about the Quen witches and the runes and all this other stuff and how he would know all of this and all of this different magic. And so she decides to go back to the campus early because I was trying to think of mentions of witches in old books, and people always wrote about witches opening windows, which the writers thought was some kind of scrying or divination. But what if it wasn't, Auntie? What if it was mapping? What if those windows opened to the other realm? And so she ends up going back to campus to go through all of these library books to try and figure out what in the absolute heck that these people were talking about and what a witch's well is, and like these mirror or these like windows and whatnot. Like, she's trying to get to the bottom of it. As she's going through the library and all of these books, the main ones that have any mention of the witch's well and of this like type of magic is from Stravos. I mentioned him earlier. He was on the mural on the ceiling when the cauldron flew up into it. He is half Quen. He is the only founding father to have any Quen blood in him. And he was, I believe, like orphaned or abandoned, and High Mage Leon like took him under his wing and took him with him when he created Tyron. And so he kind of got like adopted into all of this. And so all of like Stravos's magic, or the origination of his magic and what is documented in these books, is the closest thing she's learning and kind of figuring this out as she's going, is the closest thing to what Quen magic originally was, like what this original old time mountain magic was before it got translated and like essentially like whitewashed, right? So she's going through his original sourcing methods, his original spell work, and cracks the freaking code. But I do have to mention, while she's at the library, she runs into Renthorn. And I realized earlier today, I kept saying Renthorn, I'm pretty sure is how you're supposed to say it. Anyway, Renthorn corners her in the library, and he looks distraught. Like, he has not gotten any sleep. He is not doing well. He is not any closer to solving this whole sourcing problem, and is not going to be prepared to present to the people. So this like really kind of weird one-off, he gets a little bit too close for comfort. It's a little awkward, but she's able to like run away from the situation. Okay, right? So cue Monday morning. Toml walks up into the lab. She's there. Very, very obvious that she has not slept for a very, very long time, and that she just looks like she is like losing her absolute mind. Like, she looks crazy. And she says, It works. This is it, Toml. I've done it. Done what? Toml, bless you. I've done it. The mapping spell, the mapping spell to end all others. And so she pulls up the little spellograph, and there's a mapping coil. So it's like this circle thing that you can look into and see the other realm. But now the clouds are gone. The fuzziness is gone. It was a visual of the other realm like any other, except that the energy sources were crisp, forming edges as defined as Tyron's skyline during the day. So with that, he's like, okay, so like, how did you get to this? And she's like, you inspired me, blah, 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 blah. Explains all of the logic that went behind it. And then she's like, we have one thing left. For my final experiment, I'm going to do what we debated earlier. I'm going to remove those Fane-ordained lines that cloud the lens. We're going to open a clear window to the other realm, a Freyanin mirror. So it's named after her. This is going to be like her original spell work to be able to have this whole like mirrored thing, right? And he's like, oh, so you're okay with modifying it now? Like, you're okay with breaking your religious like doctrine? And she's like, well, I'm not breaking it or altering it. I'm just using what it originally was. So really, I'm not like breaking any religious moralistic things, right? She's just, you know what I mean? She's just trying to convince herself right now. She types in this line of spell work, hits enter. An image flared to life inside the coil. in color. And it's what? Why does it look so real? If this is in another realm, why does it look just like ours? Does it? Shona had never seen any field in the mortal realm that sparkled like that. But then again, she had never seen snow cover the ground. It looks like the Quen. What? Why would the forbidden coordinates? He murmured beneath his breath, his brows knit together. I always thought... Do you have an action spell ready for testing, ma'am? Yeah, of course. Could you do something for me, High Mage Freynin? Could you siphon? Sure. Shona had obviously been planning to test her new spell anyway. Releasing Toml's strangely rigid arm, she put her hands onto the spellograph, targeted a dense evergreen bush, and hit the siphoning key. The bush lit up bright white, beautiful godly flame, and then unraveled like a ball of yarn thrown to the wind, leaves of fine splinters spiraling outward. Shona had opened her mouth to exclaim in wonder when... Crash. The image vanished as Toml hurled the spellograph from the desk. It smashed into the nearest bookcase and broke. Screws and keys scattered in all directions. Toml! Shona cried out over the ping of the metal components on the lab floor. What are you doing? Toml was pale, shaking. His gray eyes had gone wide as if he had just seen hell itself. What is it? That? He pointed a trembling finger to the remnants of the mapping coil. That was blight. Okay, so I was right in my assumptions. There was some commentary earlier, and I realized that the siphoning was the blight. These people using the magic is what is causing the blight. It's killing people. The magic is killing people. To like sucking the life out of the outside world and like turning it into magic to be used in this city. Oh my god. So when I got to that point and I read that, I literally put the book down for an entire week. I said, you know what? I am 40% of the way through the book. I can't do it, dude. This is so sad. This is so crazy. And so in chapter 10, she's like, what do you mean that's the blight? Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, that's not possible. Not possible? I grew up in the plains of southern Quen, High Mage. I know what they fucking look like. Which I would just like to note is the first curse word in this entire book. And the F-bomb gets dropped 5 times, and this is like the one of them. And when I was reading, I noticed that immediately, and I said, oh no. And so now it gets super uber religiously confrontational, where he's like, this is the blight. And she goes on, she's like, well, they said that the blight is a sickness caused by all of this. And you know, our top researchers have always said that, and it manifests in the unwashed. Blight is not a sickness. Pox is a sickness. Fever is a sickness. Blight is a supernatural evil that happens to do exactly what your siphoning spell did to that bush. And so they have this like back and forth about religion and beliefs and the origin of the blight, and her completely doubting him and just telling him that he is misremembering things or seeing like his own personal version of hell through the vision of the other realm. And because maybe they're not supposed to see it in the first place. And she's just like in denial, right? Trying to like come up with all of these things. And eventually he says, you know, High Mage, if you think about it, somewhere in that busy little brain of yours, it must have occurred to you. What must have occurred to me? When we first met, you explained the forbidden coordinates. I'm an endurance hunter. I place all things on a map in my mind, so I've always wondered, why are the forbidden coordinates placed the way that they are, in a perfect circle, like a certain city contained within a half-sphere dome? And she says, no, you're making things up. The nature of the forbidden coordinates is not for us to know. You don't believe that, High Mage Freynin. Excuse me? If you really believed that there were godly things beyond your understanding, you never would have pushed your way into the high magistracy against the will of your elders. You never would have opened the fain forbidden window to the other realm. If you know something is there, you have to peel back the scab whether or not your god would approve. You can't tell me that this is any different. And she's like, it is different. Like, this is hearsay. This is like anti-religion, like, you know, going off on this entire thing. And so he ends up, she continues to deny that that's what the blight was. And so he goes on saying, this is so sad. He finally tells her about the crossing. During the crossing, I watched my entire tribe turn into blood on the snow. I wonder what they died for. So you could warm your tea? Or power a cute little cylinder to keep yourself safe walking in the streets among those dirty cannibal Quen? Tears spilled down Shona's cheeks as her hand clenched impotently on her cylinder. Out of defenses, she doubled down on her last and strongest ally, because no one could refute God, least of all a blighted heathen. So I didn't say it, but you need to know the context of this before I continue reading. He stormed out of her laboratory after she said something. She followed him. They're in a stairway confronting each other. She slapped him, and then he kind of like pushed her up against a wall, not hurting her in any way, just kind of pushed her up against a wall and had this conversation, particularly the whole like, I wonder what my people died for. And she says, your people died because they deserved it. You brought this on yourselves. Yeah, that was why. Shona assured herself, even as the tears wouldn't stop falling. This was God's will. Toml just couldn't see it because he wasn't worthy. Then what are you waiting for? Be a real tyrannish mage and kill me, now that I'm no longer of use to you. Shona couldn't move. She couldn't think. The only real thing left in the world was the beating of Toml's heart against her knuckles, hard and frenetic, despite the ice in his eyes. You're the worst kind of murderer, I think. The kind who won't even see the crime. You've never worshipped a god of truth. You worship delusion. And he storms out of the university. And she gets confronted by a couple of the other high mages as she goes back up the stairs and through the hallway because they all heard them yelling. She plays it off and ignores them, shuts and locks her laboratory door, goes and picks up the spellograph, pieces it back together enough to be able to like use it again. And she does so. She types in some random coordinates, kind of like bopping around, ends up finding a family walking along the beach collecting seashells. She's never seen people that looked like them before, and she's just like watching these little kids play and laugh and collecting things, and she changes the coordinates a little bit to get like closer and closer to these people, and she hits the button to siphon, and through this mirror, fully colored, clear as day, window into the other realm, she hits the siphoning button, and she watches this woman deteriorate and suffer from the blight in front of her. She watches this woman die a horrific, painful death in front of her family. Shona, realizing that that's what's happening and that this woman is suffering, tries to like cancel it as fast as she can. And she does. And now the woman is like half deteriorated, half alive, heart still beating, suffering like this horrific pain. And so Shona just starts screaming. Whatever the girl's life had been, it was over. Traded for a flash of fire here in Shona's lab 1,000 miles away. I'm sorry, Shona sobbed. I'm sorry. She never felt as powerless as she did before that mapping coil, watching those bright black eyes go dead. And we go into chapter 11 called Common Curse Work. So she is like not catatonic necessarily, but kind of sort of like she's just screaming uncontrollably, and like people are banging on her lab door to like get in. Eventually they have to like break into said lab and get her. She ended up throwing the spellograph, so it broke again, and she like destroyed the spell that she had on there, so nobody can like recreate it necessarily. And she's not unresponsive to anybody, and so finally they get Brigham in there. They take her to another room, and it's her and Brigham in this room kind of alone and talking. And so she ends up opening up to him about what she saw. Takes her a really, really long time to come down, but she tells him. He says, oh, my dear, that was just dark magic. That's not real. That's not what really happened. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's curse work, not any that you would be familiar with. There are darker magics that even the whole of the high magistry hasn't purged or come to understand. It doesn't surprise me that you've delved so deep enough to trigger one of these antique curses so early in your career, you clever devil. And it's curses set by the high mage that like did the whatever crazy ultimate sin thing and ended up getting killed, like had like a death sentence. The belief, or at least what like high mage Brigham is telling her, or archmage Brigham is telling her, is that he set a bunch of traps around the university to have these like dark magic triggers to scar people as like revenge or something maybe. And so she says, okay, so hope flickered back on in the depths. You think I've been tricked? She asked weakly. This has happened to other high mages. Yes, you know, like that crazy mage Sabrin. Yeah, he just did some horrible things. Like you just, it's nothing. You didn't actually do anything bad though, okay? You gotta relax. And he tells her to go home. He's like, hey, you just go take a couple days though. There's a lot going on. Like you just need to go, you know, get yourself together. And so she does, right? She goes back up through the labs. She's like walking through the halls, and all of the other high mages are heckling her right? They're like, oh, of course, it's a woman to have a meltdown. Like, of course, women aren't built, girls aren't built to handle magic, blah, 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 blah. It had never been easier to ignore taunting. All meaning had bled out of the world the way that the girl had in the ocean. What's the matter? Renthorn called after her as she picked her pace up and found herself running. Freynan, what did you see? She continues to ignore them, and she ends up going straight home. She holds it together. The second that she gets home, she throws herself into her aunt's arms, and she says, Aunt Winnie, am I a good person? And Winnie's like, oh, darling, like, of course you are. Of course you are. You know, like hugging her, supporting her, and she just sobs, completely, utterly sobbing. She hadn't meant to cry so long, had never cried so long in her life, but there had never been so much to grieve. When she had wept all she could for the girl at the ocean, she had to mourn her dream of more than 20 years. When she had to mourn the cost of every soul she had ever written in her life, so many that if she shed one paltry tear for each, she would shrivel with the loss and die long before she finished, and it still wouldn't be enough. Toml had said that how a person felt about their actions didn't matter, only the actions themselves mattered, and adding up the damage of all of Shona's spells was too much. Far too much. Even if she held to her conviction that God weighed a soul's intentions, how could any volume of guilt or sorrow possibly cancel all the evil that she had done? She was one soul adrift in an ocean of blood. All the tears in the world wouldn't wash that from her hands or fill her channel to heaven. Oh my God, this is so sad. This is so sad. And so coming to this realization, her entire life has been wanting to do magic. Her entire life has been magic and wanting to prove herself and be this like great, amazing, intelligent person and have all of these great effects. And every single time that she did any of that, she was killing something, killing someone. Be it a person or an animal or a bush or a fish or a patch of grass. Like, it could have been anything. She was taking life from something for every single thing that she did. Everything that she has ever done. Oh my God, dude. And so the weight of this, right? The weight of this realization, she spirals and spirals and spirals to the point where she sees the only solution for this being that there needs to be like one less mage in the world. And so she is having like ideation of ending her own life. She's about to. Her cousin catches her and holds her and is like, no, I won't let you. And Shona says, you don't understand. I know, sweetheart. I know that I don't understand what's in your head and I never will, but you have to stay with me, my darling, stay with me. You don't. Shona shook with emotion. Stay here. You don't know what you're asking me to do. In chapter 12, we cut over to Toml, and he is having very, very similar ideations upon realizing, just the gravity of everything and what is going on and the guilt and just horrible stuff that he feels. And so he's sitting atop the rooftop of his apartment complex. Somewhere in his time playing mage's assistant, he had forgotten what he was. Not a citizen of the city, just flesh that it had fed on. He had mocked High Mage Frennan's blindness, but he had been just as blind, hadn't he? Seduced by a light that was best left alone. And Toml was more pathetic of the two, for he hadn't burned himself pursuing the ideals of his gods and kin. No, his lure had been the meadow-green light of Shona Frennan's gaze. He had started to live for the moments that the mage smiled at him, the moments he could make her brow crease in thought, in the way that her eyes would brighten when she came up with a response. He had forgotten how he and his sister had returned to their father's resting place 2 years after his death to find the grass growing verdant among the bones, painfully green and up to their knees. Oh my God. And so he's up there dealing with all of this, and Kara comes and visits him on the rooftop. Kara is his niece. She survived. And they live together, and he's, like, supporting her, and she's, like, 14 years old now. And she says, you look like crap. Kara spoke Kaldonish to Toml most of the time, but her voice in their native tongue always sounded too much like his sister's. And right now, the echo of his sister was too much for Toml. He turned away so Kara wouldn't see the tears standing in his eyes. And so she asks again, are you all right, uncle? And he says no. Awkwardly, Kara scooted closer to Toml so her shoulder touched his. She wasn't good at dealing with emotions, her own or anyone else's. That, too, was a failure of Toml's, and Tiernan's, he supposed. A Quen girl didn't survive the city without many layers of armor, and often not even then. Toml had just never escaped the feeling that Kara's real parents would have taught her to navigate this life better. They would have found a way to make her strong without making her jagged. He put an arm around his niece and kissed the top of her head. I love you. He didn't say it often enough. It was such a beautiful sound in Caldonish. It would be a pity for such music to disappear from the world. And so he goes on, dude, literally every single time from here out, whenever we get these like chapter bits in these scenes between him and his niece, it like hurts me so badly. And so she continues to ask him like what's going on, and he goes on to tell her. He told Kara everything that he had learned in Shona's lab earlier that day because she would surely pry until she had the truth, and selfishly, because he didn't want to be alone with it. Ultimately, selfishness had governed Toml's entire relationship with his niece, beginning with the way that he had raised her. Wildly, defiantly Caldone. He told himself it was how her parents would have wanted it. They would have wanted the last of their line to remember their names and feel their absence, sing their songs, and speak their language. There was probably some truth to the assumption, but the deeper truth was that Toml couldn't bear to be the very last of his people. A selfless guardian would have let Kara be tyrannish. Let her put up her hair and fuss over dresses like a tyrannish girl. Let her grow up to speak without an accent, and then come to resent her uncle for his poor manner of speaking and the dirty Quen habits no amount of time could break. Instead, he had raised her Caldone, and Caldone did not hide from the truth. So he told her what he had learned of the Blight, adding this night to the long list of wrongs that he had done his niece. She takes this, I guess, as well as you can. She tears up a little bit, and when the sun rises and all of the factories turn on and it's like the really, really loud humming noises of all of the magic running and turning on, she just like screams as loud as possible and nobody can hear it. And she goes downstairs and he starts like praying to his old gods and asking for forgiveness. His gods never answered. How could they in this world of metal and gears where they had no voice? Why would they, when their last son had forsaken them for a pair of false green eyes? The only god to answer was the roaring maw of Tyrion. Toml opened his eyes and knew for certain in his broken heart, this is how the Caldone truly died. In pain, too great for two small souls to bear without corruption. Oh my god, this book is so good. This book is genuinely so freaking good. And I know this video is going to be so long. Like, this is probably going to be one of my longest ones in a while. And I'm still cutting so much out of this. Like, I need you so badly to go and read this freaking book, dude. Oh my god. So in chapter 13, we're back to Shona, and she is continuing to spiral and not do very well at her aunt's house, and is completely, like, inconsolable. And it's gotten to the point that the aunt is calling an alchemist to come over and like take care of her, which is pretty much like I would think like our world's equivalent of like a psychiatrist, to treat her and give her medication. Her cousin goes to her room though, and she says, hey, Shona, for real, like shaking her. She's like, Shona, you have to wake up. You have to snap out of this right now. Like, if you don't, and this alchemist comes over and says that you're not healthy, he's going to take everything away from you. He's going to give you medication. You're going to become a numb robot and you're not going to know anything anymore. You have to wake up. Please snap out of this and get it together. If Shona failed to turn the alchemist away, she would lose the ability to face any of the demons on her own terms. And facing the horrors of knowledge on her own terms was still, somehow, less frightening than the idea of being washed from existence, her brilliance and knowledge and pain forgotten, like the work of so many mages' wives in Midra before her. And so she's like, don't worry, Alba, I'll handle the doctor. And I know it's like, we're talking about this whole alchemist thing, but it just makes me think of like lobotomies. And I don't know if that is necessarily what it's like, you know, like an allegory for, or if that's kind of what we're like the real world parallel here. But it feels like it is. And the idea of these like so many like women in history. Wow, I am like really getting fucked up over this right now. The idea of these like brilliant women and people just getting trampled on because they were even minutely out of what the expectation was, or they were like a little bit too emotional for somebody to be comfortable with, and so they were like forced molded into this like comfortable, tolerable, palatable version of themselves, is so heartbreaking and sad. And especially in this like particular instance where you see it all laid out so clearly of why she's having this problem, and just for that to be the easy fix is just like, I don't know. It makes me so sad. So again, this is why I was like, I was taking my time with this book because it was so good and I didn't want it to end. And also because I was so scared. Like, I was so scared for Shona. But she does. She gets it together. She puts on her little white, high mage coat. So when he comes over, he'll like know what's up. You know what I mean? She's not just some crazy woman. She's like a educated woman and he's somebody that he should respect, right? Which is horrible that that's like what it comes down to, but you got to play the game, right? Like, it is what it is. And he says, this is a classic example of how dangerous it is for a female to pursue a career like yours. It's understandable, with a mind as great as yours, that you have aspirations beyond your sex, but the scientific truth is that these pursuits unsettle your mind. They defy your nature. She says, oh, do they defy my nature, doctor? It was an honest question. As far as Shona could remember, from the first time that she had grasped concepts of magical power, her academic aspirations had been the crux of her being. If there was a version of her that yearned for motherhood, subservience, and domestic life, it never made itself known. And she knew for certain now that it never would. What woman with a heart could settle into a home full of magic-powered appliances and push out future mages for her mage husband, knowing what Shona knew? And so she kind of pushes back on this and she's like, okay, well, if you treat me like you're just going to destroy my mind. And he says, I fear you did not understand your fundamental medical courses then. If you had, you would know that my work is not to destroy, but to improve. Meaning you make docile housewives of discontented women? Precisely. The alchemist smiled, as though Shona had just paid him a high compliment. And so she ends up talking to him about all this like other stuff. And she's like, hey, you know what? Actually, don't worry. I'm not going to hurt myself or like hurt anybody else. But like, I need to run something by you. I need to test an idea real quick, right? What I'm experiencing, this evil feeling, doesn't have to matter if I can just do tangible good with it. Maybe heaven isn't out of reach. That is not how God measures goodness, High Mage. Not the god of Tyrion, no, but some god somewhere. High Mage Frenin, if you spake hearsay, I'm legally obligated to treat you for mental instability. On the contrary, doctor, all of this, everything that's happening to my mind has been in pursuit of the truth, the holiest of God's ideals. This feeling is energy, and this hollow in me is just, what had Toml called it? The valley, Shona whispered. Vakal, it's what? Waiting for the river, Shona smiled. So in the end, my dear cousin was onto something. The question isn't, how do I stop feeling this way? That's stupid. I can't. The question is, what can I do with this feeling? That's something I can work with because I'm not bound by limitations of matter or sex or Ehrman's godforsaken model. I can do anything that I want, anything. I just have to find the right action spell. The model thing is like some doctor thing that they had talked about in passing, or that they had talked about previously, whatever. And so she ends the conversation and she says, "You're free to go, doctor," she said, instead of wasting any more breath explaining herself. "And don't worry, I won't try to hurt myself again. Not physically, anyway." Her next conversation with Toml would surely not be painless. How can I be sure of that? Because I have work to do. Toml said a woman was weighed at the gates of heaven by her actions and their impact on the world. Well, Shona was going to leave an impact. Whatever happened next, whether it led to hell or heaven, she was going to have a hand in directing it. Sick or sound, good or evil, she was still Shona Frenin. And Shona Frenin didn't slow down. Shona Frenin would be remembered. And so in chapter 14, I didn't really mention it earlier, but her aunt lives next door to a bakery. And the baker has a couple of sons. One of them had a crush on her and would bring her these like little baskets of like goodies and baked goods and whatnot. And it was very, very cute, very wholesome, right? But one of the sons there had taken his own life. He was a border guard. And so she's talking to the other son, to his brother, trying to figure out like, hey, do you know, like, what happened? Man, Winnie says that he left home a happy, ambitious man and he came back different. And the brother goes on and he's like, hey, I can't tell you. He came back torn up. And she's like, well, what was it? Like, what did he see there that tore him up so bad? He wouldn't say. Wouldn't or couldn't? I don't know. I mean, it was all top secret. He really shouldn't have been telling us anything he saw at the barrier. He was just in such a state, I don't think he even remembered the rules. And you think that's why he killed himself? Because of the injuries that he saw? No, that wasn't the thing. Or the only thing that really tormented him. Then why? Just that, I guess if the injured Quen couldn't be helped or if the camps were at capacity, the guards were supposed to throw them back outside the barrier. They what? Shona had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her blood run cold. And so the brother is like, he wouldn't do it. Like, he wouldn't put them back across the barrier. Like, he said that he could never do it, and he would wake up screaming and crying that he wouldn't do it. Whatever he did or didn't do, it seems like he watched other guards throw Quen back through the barrier, and whatever happened to them then, whatever my brother saw, he couldn't take it. After a year of us trying to get him back into the rhythm of the bakery, he just, like, ended things, and the brother just starts crying like a little girl is what he says. And she's like, it's all right, I do it all the time. He laughs a little, and then he says, I don't want you to think that my brother was a lunatic or a coward. I know he wasn't. He was a good soul who saw things no good soul could process. You really think so? I do. Perhaps what Karseth had done, the way he had ended it, was the only thing a good soul could do, faced with the reality of the barrier. Thank God Shona's ego superseded her immortal soul. She needed something more than an impotent end on cobbles beneath her window. She needed action. But that certainly didn't make her a better or stronger person than Karseth barreled. He wasn't weak. He was a good man. This is so sad. And so she ends up, from that situation, she goes over to visit Toml. She, had gone to the university and looked at his, employment package or something, and that's how she was able to find his address. And so she's, making her way through the slums of the Quen people and making kind of, this, side comment of, yeah, I walked through here with all of my stuff, and, I never got bothered one time. In fact, people were helping me out with things. My aunt would be so surprised. All she ever said was that, you'd get, robbed the second that you step foot out there. But everybody was actually really nice to her, or they just ignored her entirely and acted like she wasn't there. So obviously Toml is not happy to see her, and he tries to slam the door shut, but she throws herself in the doorway. So he closes it on her shoulder/head, and she ends up getting a cut and bleeding. And he's like, come inside. Just freaking come in here before somebody thinks that I attacked a Tyranish woman and I get slaughtered in the streets. And she's like, I would never say that. I wouldn't say that that's what happened. And he's like, it doesn't matter what you would say. It matters what it would look like. So he takes her inside and starts treating the cut on her forehead. And she's like, oh my God, you're really, really good at this. And he's like, yeah, I've had a whole bunch of jobs, and you'd be amazed how much that we have to treat ourselves and treat, the people around us. We really don't, we don't really have healthcare. And then B, he's like, my daughter gets hurt a whole bunch. I've always, she's a rough kid. And she says, whoa, wait, you have a backup. You have a daughter? I do. You never brought that up? You never asked. Oh. And so she tells him about what she did after he left and how she saw it firsthand, what the blight was, and that she apologizes for not believing him and, kind of explaining what she's been going through. And he says, oh, with no emotion. And then she says, I double checked what you said about the forbidden coordinates against my maps at home, and it holds up perfectly. The forbidden coordinates do line up with Tyran, and the reserve siphoning zone numbers line up with the area 2 Lennox miles beyond Tyran's border. Toml's eyebrow twitched. What does that mean? The reserve is Tyran's fallback energy pool, so reserve coordinates represent a space of continuous automated siphoning. Those 2 miles around Tyran were what the Quen called the crossing. It was where Toml had lost his sister. So the river thing that's around the city and all of that crossing area, that 2-mile sprint that all of the Quen people have to go through to try and get into the city is so dangerous with the blight, because that's where all of the automated siphoning is coming from, because there are so many people that are trying to get into Tyran and be safe and find safety. This is so horrific, dude. Oh, that's why it's a barren wasteland. That's why the whole thing of them running across it. This is such a crazy freaking book. And then she goes on to tell him that she told Archmage Brigham what happened, and he said that it was dark magic. Okay, so you don't believe him? I can't. I mean, I see where his claims come from and why he might be sure of them, but the evidence doesn't bear them out. So you think he lied to you? No, he doesn't lie to me. He just doesn't have access to all of the information. And she's pretty much like, no, I think we just cracked some crazy code. There's no way that the high mages and everyone superior to that is aware of what's happening. There's no way that anybody actually knows the truth. I think we actually we broke some revolutionary thing and we found out this like really big secret. Before they can continue the conversation, Kara comes home, greets him as uncle, and then Shona's like, oh, why aren't you in school? Whatever, whole little back and forth banter. Immediately Kara is just like having like mad attitude with Shona. Turns out we learn in passing that Kara works like 2 jobs and she's like a chimney sweep because she has to pretend to be a boy when she leaves the house. Otherwise, she would get like pretty much like assaulted and like abused by other people if they don't think that she's a boy. And there's just these like really, really horrible implications of like child labor and just in general, just treatment of Quen and Quen women specifically. She steps out of the room and then Shona looks over at Toml and she's like, you said she was your daughter, but she just called you uncle. And he's like, I can explain, but please, I just need you to promise. Like, I know we're not on the best terms, but you can't tell anybody like what's happening. And she's like, my lips are sealed, but I don't understand why it would matter. The crossing into Tyrion was the last gasp of the Caldone. Kara and I are just the death rattle. What do you mean? I mean, we're the last. I told you that I lost my sister to the crossing, but with her went the rest of our tribe, including my brother-in-law, Kara's father. Healthy Quen orphans get taken straight to the workhouses. The ones who are visibly injured, like Kara was, and she like puts it together because she obviously just had this engagement with the border guard's brother and hearing about the way that they treat the Quen when they come through the border crossing. Oh, so she's piecing this together. She can't piece it together for very long though, because Kara comes up behind her with like a knife, about to straight up just stab her. Luckily, Toml sees it, catches it, grabs the knife, and then like holds Kara back. Calm down, he commanded before switching to a rolling deep language that Shona was certain she had never heard before in the mouth of any Quen, because it wasn't a language that any other Quen spoke. She realized after a moment. It was Caldonish, a nearly dead language ferociously alive on these 2 tongues here in a dingy apartment in the poorest part of Tyrion. And Kara goes on, she's like, she's a killer. You said it yourself, a mass murderer. Wait, you told her? Shona looked to Toml in horror. God, Toml, she's a child. They have this like whole back and forth. Eventually he dismisses Kara. She like goes off to her room. And then Kara's like, and then Shona's like, you don't think I'm a killer, right? Like I didn't do this on purpose. If I knew any of this, I wouldn't have done any magic. Like you know I didn't do this purposefully, right? Trying to get this like kind of validation from him almost. And he's like, no, of course not. I watched you find out. I know that you didn't know. Why should that matter to me? To Kara. We suffered. You benefited. Your guilt is useless to us. But I wasn't trying to. I know you Tyrionish aren't used to being told that you can't have things, but you won't have our forgiveness for this, no matter how much crying and complaining that you do. And Kara pops back in, and then she's like, then why don't we just kill her? Yes. If you can't forgive me, then why not kill me? Hell, you have access to the 4th floor of the High Magistracy. You could probably take out half the mapping department before you were caught, because you thought about what I said, and I thought about something you said. The content of a person's soul does matter, even to my gods. It matters that a person's soul can inspire them to change their actions. So, High Mage Frenin, where is your soul taking you? What are we going to do to change this? Her idea, her sweet summer child belief, is that if she can show them this mirror, right? If she can show them this full color, clear as day picture, and they know what they're siphoning, then she can convince all of the other high mages, like show them the truth and the horror of what they're doing. And now they can collect clearly and just collect it from animals or fish or trees or things like that. And Toml says, okay, like you're oversimplifying it though. She's like, what do you mean? We're protecting people. And he says, yeah, that's part of it. Like the blight probably took like 1/3 of the Quen people, but the rest of them died because all of the animals were dead. All of the plants that we ate were dead. We couldn't hunt or cultivate or do any of these other things because the blight took all of those creatures. And so if you don't kill a Quen directly, you're taking our livelihood. You're killing us off slowly. So no, that won't work actually. Oh my God. And then he says, but setting all of that aside, I think the more pressing question is, why would your precious high mages care about any of that? Why would they give up a good source of energy, human or otherwise? Because it's obviously wrong to siphon human beings. It's horrific. So is forcing 5-year-old children to work until their fingers bleed. But your mages don't have a problem with that so long as those children have copper in their hair to set them apart from civilized Terranish children. All right, but Shona started, but found that she had no response. Break. I didn't tell you this earlier. So the Quen do have identifiable differences. In general, they're like much larger people. They have much more tan skin, silver eyes, and copper hair. And all of the Tyranish people are super pale, green-eyed with red hair, I believe. Or like some variation of like very, very light complexions. And then Tyranish people are generally more of this like goldeny, coppery, toned folk. It hurt to think, but it was true that if the Magistry cared at all about improving the lot of the Quen, they probably would have done so many times over. Shona was ashamed that the thought had never crossed her mind. When mages thought of improving Tyran, it was only for their fellow Tyranish. The Tyranish men thought about their fellow Tyranish men. Shona very occasionally thought about her fellow Tyranish women. But the Quen were the last of afterthoughts, if they came up at all. Oh, Jesus. Again, I think the worst part of this book is obviously like this is like so horrifically sad. And I also just think with the state of the world today and like everything going on in the world today, it's so hard to see it all like written out so plainly. And then to also see like to see somebody, I'll just be frank with like the terminology and like what we're like truly saying here, right? Is this white woman who has inherently faced a lot of adversity, has gone through a lot to prove herself, coming to the realization that even at that, there are still people who suffer more judgment and suffering in general and prejudice and are treated worse than she is. And so there's this like level of like victim mentality and overcoming this to be this like great person. And then it's this like slap in the face of like, hey, that's cool for you and all, but also there's like all of these other people that still exist. And like, yeah, the adversity you faced is neat and all, but like, I'm not going to feel bad for you if I have faced more adversity than you have. Right? Like you can't ask for pity from people who were treated worse than you. And then to see this white woman coming to the realization of what it means for, in this instance, like people of color or this like other race that has been treated very, very poorly, coming to the realization of them being real human beings, like biblically, like in their text, Quen are not real people. And all of the court cases and everything that like I said, at the end of all the chapters, we get citations from court cases and like Bible and law and stuff are not recognized as human beings at all. Like they are treated as others. And so it is so difficult to see somebody going through the realization that a fellow human being is actually a fellow human being. It's such a difficult journey. It's such a difficult journey to be witness to. It's incredibly infuriating and emotional. And to hear these people have to lay out their problems in such a way to be understood by somebody else it's just hard to read. And it's hard to read in a way that is like really, really good. Like it's not bad writing. This isn't hard to read in the sense of how normally these books are. This is hard to read in the sense of like, I don't know. I feel like I've seen so many people go through this like revelation. I had to take a lot of like sociology classes. I have a couple books from like my sociology class days where it is this idea of specifically not to derail this into like my own personal freaking life or anything, but my master's degree is in education. And so we had specific courses that were tailored to, hey, everybody, let's realize that like not all students are created equal, and like you need to understand students' home lives and socioeconomic backgrounds and cultural differences. And you can have the same kids in the same classroom from the same town that had completely opposite experiences in life that will completely shape their educational journeys differently. And you need to be cognizant of it. Like you need to be cognizant of the different experiences of the people around you when you operate in a day-to-day basis. Pretty much it was like this is boiling it down to like an inappropriate degree. But I also feel like every single like management course I've ever taken, or like professional level education, management, leadership course I've ever taken, all of these, every single one of these that I take has boiled down to the core tenet of don't be a douchebag. Hey guys, how many times can we teach you to have a little bit of empathy? Every single course I took in my master's program, every single like project management, like degree or project management course I've ever taken, all these like little crazy self-help being a better human, every single one of them, the underlying factor, have a little empathy, life-changing advice. So it's, I don't know, it's just hard to witness again. I feel like that's the whole point of why I derailed. When I was in my master's program, it was online. And so I went through all of these discussion boards of these people, realizing, oh, wow, other people have lives. Other people face more adversity than I ever expected them to. People have more issues than I ever thought that they would, or like, oh, I've never thought of putting myself in people's shoes. And I'm sitting there like, it took you paying XYZ amount of money to take this course to come to that realization? It took this to realize that? Hello? The whole time. And so I feel like I'm experiencing that like firsthand again when I was reading this book. It's well written, I guess, in a way that like we're going through this journey with her of this realization. And so there's like a lot of emotional impact. And there's a lot of, I don't know, just like weight in like gravity to this entire read that is, oh, it's so good. I know I keep saying that, but fuck me, it's so good, dude. Okay, I derailed enough. You know what? And then I say that, and then I go into this next piece that I have highlighted. She ends up telling him, she's like, hey, you know, I know that we said that this is all like new ideas and whatnot, and like nobody knows what's going on, but the traitor mage, he knew what happened. And he goes, what do you mean the traitor mage knew what happened? Yeah. He killed using the forbidden coordinates, which we know now to mean that he siphoned directly from his rivals' homes. He wasn't using dark magic to kill these people. He was using the siphoning spells with the coordinates into their homes. But the issue is that, like, it was so random, the way that he was doing the siphoning, that it ended up, like, killing a bunch of his, like, family and workers and these other people. So she's like, he must not have broken the barrier to be able to, like, see. Like, he didn't have the window or the mirror to, like, see exactly what he was doing. But he figured out that the coordinates were inside of the city. And they're like, okay, that's like, this is all interesting stuff. But it's back to this whole thing where he's like, okay, you know all of this stuff, but like, why do you think anybody's going to change anything? They cover up deaths of Quens all the time. They don't care about us. Like, what do you expect to happen exactly? And she's like, fine, I'm not going to argue you on that. All I'm saying is that I doubt a whole magistry of scholars could go about generations disregarding mass slaughter. And thanks to Leon's spellwork and Fane's rules, they don't see it. They don't need to. The nature of the other realm is pretty well concealed. Is it, though, ma'am? I had my suspicions before your breakthrough, and I'm only a half-literate Quen. You're more than half-literate, and you know it. You're exceptional. No, I'm not. I'm not smarter than other Quen or stronger or more virtuous. I've just been luckier than most. This is what I don't think you understand. Tyrannus just like you. Kill Quen just like me all the time. If not by siphoning, then by other treatment at the barrier, in the factories and construction sites. She says, all right, but this, what you and I have seen, is a far cry from unsafe work conditions. The whole point, the whole mission statement of Tyrannus magic is to make life better. Adherents to that magic system wouldn't do these things if they knew that it was such a high human cost. And he says, but I'm not human, am I? Oh. And she's like trying to defend it more. And he's like, obviously your founding people didn't think we were humans. The border guards don't think we're humans. The worker, like the factory owners who put us through all of this stuff, like obviously we're not humans to any of these people. Nobody's gonna give a shit if you reveal this like grand secret. Either they already know it and they're doing it anyway, or they'll find out and they still won't care. So she says, okay, acknowledged. But, like, I need to go and talk to the high mages. I need to go and talk to Mage Brigham and tell him what I found out and, like, what my belief is, and hopefully try and, like, talk some sense into him and reveal this. And, like, I need to try to make a change. And he says, I'm afraid that they already know. I'm afraid of what that will mean for you. For me, Toml, the other mages wouldn't, well, sure, some of them would hurt me. Renthorn would almost certainly bludgeon her to death with the Stravos collection if he thought he could get away with it. But I'm not going to the ones who hate me. I'm going to Archmage Brigham, and he's got his reputation on the line for me more, and he's put his reputation on the line for me more than once. I can guarantee you I'm not in any danger. Do you have a better idea? No, just promise me one thing. Sure. If you bring everything that you've told me to Arch Brigham, and he already knows. He won't. All right. But if he does, you have to play along. Pretend to buy his cover story. Whatever he wants you to believe, act like you believe it, and go about your business like nothing is wrong. Don't ask questions. Don't antagonize. She gave Toml a wry smile. Does that sound like me? Shona. His voice was so raw with emotion that it wiped the smile from her face. These mages flay human beings to heat their tea in the morning. If they do this knowingly, they will not think twice about disposing one mouthy junior member of their order. She's like, okay, fine. Like, I swear on my mother's grave, if Brigham and the other archmages are covering the truth, then I'll play along with them. Happy? I'll be happy when I see you alive and whole in the morning. Shona smiled for real then, taken aback by Toml's words and the earnest note in his voice. That's sweet. Until tomorrow, Toml. Until tomorrow, High Mage. And so she goes off to do that. And we cut to Toml going back onto the rooftop to talk to Kara, because that's where she stormed off to after trying to kill Shona. And she's like, what do you want from me, uncle? Like, you want me to just, you tell me all these horrible things and you want me to just let a high mage, like, step all over me and just continue to lie? He says no, and she's like, what do you want from me? Toml didn't know how to answer. As always, Kara's defiance had caught him between pride and total crushing fear. There was the relief that she hadn't ended up like so many girls of the Quen Quarter, dressing tyrannish, sanding down her accent with hours of practice, and hoping desperately to move up in society by marrying a tyrannish man who would treat her like a servant in exchange for tenuous protection. At the same time, if she didn't learn to quiet her anger, she was going to end up on the wrong side of a city guard's rifle, and the Caldone would be gone. Of course, if she made herself small, she wouldn't really be Caldone, and the tribe would be gone all the same. Kara realizes, she's like, oh my god, you like the high mage, don't you? Like, you have a crush on her. And he can't deny it and whatnot. And she's like, oh my god, have you lost your mind? She's different. Was that the word that Toml wanted? It seemed falsely simple. Shona was just like any other mage in so many critical ways. Her fanaticism for her cruel god, her blindness to those beneath her, her arrogance, her devastatingly damaging actions. But in one way, she was distinct from anyone Toml had ever known. She's hope. Hope? Kara repeated. She's proven that she can change her mind, he said. So, if there's one person who can take that change of mind and use it to change this skewed world, one person with the power and the mind to do it, it's that woman. Kara didn't sound convinced. You don't have to agree with me, Toml said. Just don't stab her, all right? Fine, but only because I won't have to. What are you talking about? Well, you just sent her to spill her little heart out to all of the other mass murderers, right? That's why you're up here babbling all your usual lines to me, yeah? Because she wouldn't listen to them? Toml shook his head. My usual lines? You know, Kara said impatiently. In this city, girls like that get themselves killed. Oh no. And so we cut in chapter 15 and she's going to talk to Brigham. And of course, he knows the truth. And he's like, oh, I should have known that you would figure this out so soon. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I should have known that you wouldn't have believed the curse explanation. I thought it could have bought you some time, let you ease into the truth and whatnot. And he goes on to be like, yeah, you know, this isn't a subject that we talk about at the High Magistry. Like, this particular subject, the true nature of the other realm, we don't speak of it. He goes on to be like, you know, this is not what God ever intended us to perceive. Like, Leon put those binding spells, or like bound what we were able to put in the spells for a reason. Like, this isn't for human eyes. Like, what God gives us isn't for us to question, and we don't talk about it because it's in poor taste. And she says, poor taste? To talk about killing people? Like, you don't want me to acknowledge the truth? To name it? Isn't that a mage's purpose under God? Not in this case. Not when it comes to the other realm. And so she goes on this like entire pushback of like, this is completely against everything that we were ever taught. Like, this is against the truth. This is against like bettering everything. Like, why would we do any of this? Why would we continue to do this after you know, like, why are you willingly doing this? Because tyranny comes first. Progress comes first. Magic is all that separates our civilization from the hardship and savagery of the Quen. But we have a hand in making the Quen a savage place. The conditions, the barrier, they're conditions of our magic they're conditions our magic created. Our magic creates civilization. Where magic itself comes from is out of our hands. That is God's will. And so, again, back and forth. And then she's like, if magic and all of this stuff, like, why would a good God ask anyone to found a city at such a cost? And Brigham says, No one can know Father's reasons, and it's not our place to question. We can infer that God knew that hard times were coming to the Quen, and he wanted his true worshippers protected. Her kindly mentor was gone. He had been gone before she had ever met him. And so then she's like, okay, so you know what the other realm is. Obviously, the other archmages in the council. Who else? Anyone who served in the high magistry for more than 5 years or so, as well as any city official who's worked closely with the council for that long. Shona ran the numbers in her head. That was most of them. Most of the high magistry and most of Tyrion's government. A whole entrenched system of mass murderers and their accomplices here in the heart of civilization. And she's like, okay, well, I figured out this mirror thing. Like what I've done for the sourcing spell, I figured out a way that we don't commit murder. And he says, no. It's not murder. It's not murder to use what God has gifted us. But now God has also given us a way to use it without hurting anyone. Isn't that a greater gift? The opportunity to move forward in clear conscience? Shona, your compassion does you credit as a woman, but you must see that it's not realistic. Even if we were to direct magic away from human beings, Tyrion must still feed on the life and forms of plants and animals. The savages of the Quen are still living on borrowed time, on land that cannot sustain them. And okay, she's like, okay, so this conversation's not working. And he goes on, again, this entire religious thing of the Quen brought it upon themselves. And she brings up, the crossing. And she's like, they don't make it across the crossing. They don't make it across the reserve. The vast majority of them die in the reserve siphoning zone around the barrier. In his response, Brigham's response, her hero's response, her father figure's response that she has looked up to for so long, that has helped her achieve this great career goal, says, and thank goodness for that. Can you imagine this city without the use of the reserve? Or worse, overrun with Quen in such numbers? Worse. The implication was nauseating. The most important function of the reserve was not to provide energy, but to keep the vermin out. Continued back and forth. And at the very, very end of this, he says, I can't tell you how many people warned me that a woman would be too soft for this revelation. Don't prove them right. I won't, Shona said. And with those words, a fresh determination flickered to life in the emptiness. It wasn't a strong feeling. The hollow was too oppressive. And it's the hollowness of her realizing that she doesn't believe in her God anymore. That she can't believe in a God that would justify or accept such levels of cruelty. And so this emptiness that she's feeling is the lack of religion. It wasn't a strong feeling. The hollow was too oppressive. And the first sparks wouldn't catch on cold nothing. But it was the beginning of a conviction. She would not be soft, but nor would she be the hard eyes that Brigham wanted. She was going to show the mages of Tyrion something that they had never seen before. She was going to show them hellfire. And he ends their conversation with him telling her that she's going to need to fire her assistant because of the way that he acted out. And then also if he had seen any of this truth behind it, he needs to be discredited and whatnot. So she's going to have to fire Toml. And then he's also, asks her how she's doing on her, the sourcing proposal thing, because she has to present that next week. And she's like, it's going great. Don't worry about it. I'll put on a whole show for him. It's going to be awesome, which is deeply concerning at this point. So she goes back to her laboratory after this conversation. The path to God wasn't laid for women like her. It was laid on their backs. And if there was a signpost where Shona was supposed to lay down her tools and kneel, let herself be a stepping stone for someone else, she had passed it a long time ago. She had passed it over and over by simply refusing to slow down for anyone. Why should Brigham be an exception? Why should God himself be an exception? Oh my God. So while going to her office, she runs into one of the other new high mages, Mordra. He's been kind of nice to her, kind of okay. He never actively engaged in, the bullying of her, but he also, never really helped her out. You know what I mean? And so she says, are you a kind person, Mordra? He looked confused. I'd like to think so. I'd like to hope so. Yeah, me too. Are you sure you're all right? Because he stopped her to ask if she was okay, how she was doing and whatnot. High Mage Mordra, if you're a good person, or if you aspire to be, you should ask your father to pull some strings and find you a different job, one far away from magic and politics. Why? I appreciate you checking on me. I have to get going. And then she leaves. And I said, yo, I ain't gonna lie. Ain't that some school shooter type beat? That was That was the moment in chapter 15 at the very end of that. I said, oh no, she's about to like end all of these people. This is about to go sideways, my guy. Oh no. Oh no. And we're only 62% of the way through the book. This video is taking so long. In chapter 16, she is back in the library doing some more gathering of books, right? She figured out the one spell to do this whole mirror thing. Now she's doing some more extreme things, given all of this new information that she has. While she's in the library that night, Renthorn shows up. He smells like alcohol. He's very clearly distressed, I guess, to a degree. Disheveled. Shut up. I always get comments about how I say that word wrong. Disheveled. Like, he is very much struggling and hasn't slept for days and not doing very good. And so he's talking to her about how the spell is going and like what she saw in the source material and blah, blah, blah. And this is the chapter where the assault happens. It's very clear that he has an obsession with taking and pain and suffering and like causing people to suffer, and very much just like that type of behavior. And he goes on to try to assault her. It's incredibly, like, objectively probably one of the most like triggering scenes that I've read in a long time. And I don't know if it's just because it was so unexpected in a book like this, or if like I was already so emotionally invested at this point that I was like, whoa, ugh, oofta. I'm usually pretty okay with that stuff in like dark romance, because I think I expect it more, and so I can mentally prepare a little bit. But this one caught me sideways real bad. But so he does this. Right as he's about to do it though, Toml shows up, decks the guy, like punches him in the side of the head, and the dude passes out. And I have a sticker specifically for these moments that says, I love when abusers get abused. And this is yet again one of those instances. And so he's passed out on the floor. Toml comforts her. She just starts like sobbing uncontrollably, because I haven't said it, it's not really important. She's never had a relationship before. She's never been close to anybody before. She's never even like kissed anybody or had anything beyond that. And so this was like a horrific experience for her, even though ultimately all he did was kiss her. He was about to do all the other stuff, but Toml had stopped it. But her having this like horrific experience of like the assault will impact her decisions from here throughout the book, where she like has recollections of it. And so it's just very, very difficult. But anyway, Toml is comforting her, and all of a sudden the other mages show up. They heard the commotion, and obviously the first assumption is that Toml was the one that was assaulting her, and Renthorn tried to save her from him. And so they're all about to like gang up on Toml. And she goes, and they're like calling security, and they're not listening to her, and she's still like kind of in shock about everything. But she gets enough wherewithal to instead be like, oh my God, you idiot, Quen, I can't believe you. This is what I get for trusting you to carry a conduit, which is like this little vial of explosive. She had originally tried to use it on Renthorn herself, but he like bopped it out of her hand, and so there was an explosion in the library, like a real small one. That's the reason that other people came running as well. And so she blames that on Toml, and she's like, oh, this is what I get for letting you handle that. Like, you know, the explosion is what caused Renthorn to pass out because this guy's so freaking incompetent. Like, you're fired. Get out of here. He catches along with what's going on. So he cowers, you know, he plays the role of this like broken, unintelligent Quen, subhuman thing that they're all looking at him like he is. He plays along with this role to get out of the situation unscathed, supposedly. So the security guards come, and they just like take him out of the university instead of just like all of the other high mages. Like pretty much like either they would like kill him there in the library, or he gets like dragged out by these security guards. So at least she spared him in that way. So that's good. Renthorn's still passed out, and all the other ones are trying to comfort her and ask her what happens, and she's just like playing it off, and then trying to get out of the situation, and they keep telling her she can't leave, and so she ends up snapping on all of them. Anger, like raging. She's like, you're a piece of shit because of this. Everyone hates you because of this. No one's your real friend. Nobody tells you why your spells suck, but they do. Like, just like pops off on all of these men about how horrific that they are and how bad they are at all of their jobs. And then she ends up like running out and just like crying. Like, the first thing that she does though, after this, she gets out, is she goes down to the like janitor office, like the cleaning facility cleaner office thing. And she knows his name because Toml has mentioned it. So she greets him. He's really surprised that he knows her name, and she makes small talk with him while asking where her typewriter is. Her spellograph that she had destroyed, right? Whenever she had her freak out and she threw it on the thing and it shattered and stuff, the janitors came up and cleaned the area. And so she's going back down here to figure out where said spellograph is. And he took it to pretty much like the junkyard. He was like, they said that it wasn't able to be fixed, and so that's where it is. And she says, okay, well, hey, can you come with me? I need to go and find it. He says, okay. She's making small talk with him throughout this and asking him like what tribe he's from and if any of his family ever ended up joining him after he explains he came here with his mom and dad, or his mom, and they were waiting for his dad or something. They have this like whole conversation. And she ends up making some small talk with him about, she says, the future has to be different. It will be different. You think so, High Mage? Tell me, Dermot, if somehow some of your people lived and there was a chance that you could protect them from blight, but it was a small chance, very risky, would you take it? Gods, of course, ma'am. I'm old. My chances at life are all gone. If there was a prayer that I could protect anyone from blight, I would take it. Risks be damned, if you'll excuse my language. You're certain? Certain as blight, High Mage. Perfect. Then I'm gonna need your keys. Oh my god! In chapter 17, it's called Girl Talk. She took all of this equipment from the spellograph, all the screws that she could find, everything that she could, and takes it back to her aunt's house. Alba, her cousin, used to work at a clock shop, and the clock shop people also make said spellograph. And so she worked at this little repair thing. So she's going to repair said spellograph for Shona. And she's like, okay, well, fine, cousin, like, I'll do it for you in exchange for you doing dishes. If you even remember how to do them, she gently teased. That was all Alba ever did, gently tease about Shona's total disinterest in housework. In another household, that attitude would have been actively punished, but not here. Alba and Aunt Winnie had always picked up Shona's slack in the house while she pursued every ridiculous aspiration. Shona had grown up assuming that they did this out of faith, an unspoken belief that if they just took care of the house and let Shona study, great things would come of it. But there was a flaw in that calculation, she realized, as she stacked Winnie's chipped plates by the sink. Alba and Aunt Winnie didn't care for the glory the way that Shona did, or wealth the way so many others did. It wasn't faith at all, nor any notion that Shona's talents would one day reward them with status. It was love. And so then Alba, she fixes it through the night, and she's like, well, if you get that, she's like, well, so what are you, what's up with this, like, hysterical breakdown? What's wrong? Like, what do you got going on? What is this spellograph for? Like, what are you needing this for? And Shona says, well, if everything goes according to plan, you'll find out on Farron's Eve. I will? It's not something I can really explain. You have to see it for yourself. So Farron's Eve is it's the last night before they go into a 3-month darkness, like a 3-month winter. And so on this very last day, they have like a huge feast. It's like a tradition thing from the Quen that the Tyranish people have adopted. And so it ends up being this like really big time of bonding and like mutual acceptance. And it's actually one of the few times where the Quen are kind of accepted and everybody just has a good time and like have a feast together. And it's like a very, very big deal in the city. And so on that eve, though, that's when they have the like high magistry council meeting when they're going to be doing their proposals for the sourcing thing for the barrier expansion. It's all happening that same day, right? Just for context for you. Alba gets this fixed. She gives it to Shona and she's like, hey, I thought you couldn't do spells. Like you couldn't use a spellograph outside of the university grounds. Like they have sensors for that, don't they? Shona says, yeah, they do, but that's why I'm not going to actually do any spells. I'm just typing them. I'm not going to like hit enter on the button. And so Shona goes to her room, spends the entire night writing this crazy spell, this crazy idea that she has. She got to the very end of this and she had to pause here and ask herself one last time, are you really going to do this? This is the mark that you want to leave on the world. So she wakes up the next day. She had fallen asleep typing. Her aunt wakes her. Her aunt is amazed by the stack of papers that she has. Like this is an insane amount of like spell work. She gathers up her things, gets the spellograph, gets all the papers that she's written, gets everything else, throws it into like a little rolling suitcase, and she heads over to Toml's house. When she gets there, Toml's not there, but Kara is. She goes inside. It's a little 1-bedroom, like the smallest kitchen ever, a tiny, tiny, tiny living room. Their coffee table is like literally a crate, and their couch is really kind of battered. I haven't really described it to you. I've just said slums, and I kind of hoped that I guess that would like convey the situation that they're in. This really, really tiny, rundown apartment complex though, right? Or high rise. But when she gets in there this day, there's even less things around. It's packed up. They've packed absolutely everything. And so she asks Kara what's going on. And Kara tells her, like, you've ruined it. We have to get out of here. The university's going to come after him. They already beat the crap out of him. And then now, like, they're more than likely, like, they're going to punish him and come here and find us for him, you know, hurting you or assaulting you. It doesn't matter what you said. He's afraid for us now. So now we have to move from the only place that I've ever lived. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, this really horrible pushback. And Shona didn't realize the implications of what happened. She thought that if she just fired him, that would be the end of it. She never even considered or thought. But they, like, literally, the guards kicked him out of the university and, like, taught him a lesson and, like, just completely beat him black and blue. And Shona, eventually she's like, hey, I have a plan this time. Kara says, your plan last time was to talk to the mage, and that obviously didn't go very good. That wasn't a plan, per se, Shona protested. That was a conversation I needed to have with my mentor. This time I have a real plan. You think that anything you can do can make this better? No, not retroactively. Obviously, we can't bring back your parents or undo any of the damage tyrannish magic has already wrought, but I do think that we can make things better for Quen in the future. And even if we can't, I'm just insane. Don't you think it's worth a try? I don't know why you're asking me, Kara scowled. Because I need to ask Toml's permission and yours before going ahead. If I'm going to activate this spell work I've planned, I at least have to ask Toml if he thinks it's a good idea. And then there's a break in text. And then the very next line says, that's a terrible idea, Toml said when Shona explained the spell web. She explains it to him, but it gets talked about vaguely to us. It is not revealed what the spell web is. The high magistry and the city council people and whoever know what the magic is, but she's like, if the regular tyrannish people figure out what's going on, they'll push back. You know, we're biased, like the other high mages and these like magical people, obviously, you know, those are unique situations. They're going to view this whole situation differently. But if normal people, like my aunt who lives next door to Quen, if my aunt found out about this, she would be outraged. Like, they wouldn't approve of this. So we have to let the masses know what's going on. They have to see the truth of what their, you know, electricity is powered by. And he goes on the whole thing of like, why do you think that they would feel any differently? Because the average people are, well, people, and the mages aren't? No, mages are detached from reality. They're obsessive, socially stunted egomaniacs, you know, like me. They're not representative of the Tynirish population. They have some back and forth, and she apologizes for him getting beat up, and he says it's okay, it was worth it to be able to punch Renthorn. And he explains to her that maybe she was the first Tyrannish woman that he had assaulted, but she was not the first in general, that he had assaulted multiple Quen women, and that's why you never see any Quen women on the 4th floor, because the janitor guy that like helped her get that spellograph, he found out about it, had heard them talk about it, and so then he never allowed another girl or a woman to go up to that floor so that they wouldn't get assaulted by Renthorn. And then he also goes on to like reveal to her that dude is like literally obsessed with causing people pain, and how when he had messed something up, Renthorn had like broken a beaker and like pretty much tortured him with like broken glass and like really harming Toml for like hours long. And she's like, oh my God, that's horrific. And he's like, that's literally not even the worst, and I'm not even the only one. Like, this dude literally just loves to hurt people. And she's like, the high mages, like, no one else knows about that, right? Like, that, if somebody knew, they would stop it. They do know. One of them was in the room and watched it happen. And she has a memory of the conversation that she had with Brigham, where he said that we do not speak of it. It is in poor taste. He continues to push back on her grand plan, her idea, her spell work, right? That she's wanting him to like co-sign off of, basically. And he's saying, like, I don't think this is going to go how you think it is. Like, none of this is going to work out the way that you want. And she says, look, I know it's probably not the smart thing to do, okay? So why are you doing it? Because I have to. Do you understand? The reason I'm still alive is because I decided that these feelings, the fear, the sadness, the rage, were all just energy, transmutable to good. But that only works if I do something with that energy. So just nothing? That's not an option. That's the only non-option. And she's like, what I'm doing, what I'm proposing, it has never been done before. The archmages are subject to public scrutiny and judgment. Half the power they wield is political, contingent on public opinion. After the city knows what they've done, the council will be the enemy, not me, and certainly not the Quen. And why do you think that? Kara scoffed. Because the archmages are butchers and cowards. Butchers who have given the Tyrannish homes, warmth, safety, electric lights, fast trains, running water, and a sense of being blessed by their god. Toml said, that's a lot to ask a person to give up for something as pesky as the truth. Oh my god. She says, okay, whatever, dude. Like, she's like, this is my plan. He's like, don't do this because of me. Like, don't do any of this because of me. Be selfish, be arrogant. Do it for yourself. Why would you say that? Because I don't want to be the reason that anyone gets hurt. I don't want to be the reason that you die. This, again, Toml, I'm not going to die. You belong to an order of mass murderers, and you're about to call them out in front of their followers. It's not a question this time. They will kill you. I have a failsafe in case I'm wrong. A failsafe? Yes, but assuming the worst, I won't be able to execute it myself. I'll need your help. What would you need our help for? Kara clearly tried for an indignant tone, but couldn't quite mask her curiosity. Toml's help, Shona clarified firmly. But don't worry, Kara. You'll love the plan. I will? It's really violent. Oh my god. So in chapter 18, Kara and Shona sneak into the university, disguised as young Quen boys, dressed as like janitorial staff, to clean. She has a copy of all of the keys that she got from the janitor. She like literally went to all of these different shops around town to get copies so that it wouldn't look suspicious. Collected all of this material. They have a cart. They're, covering whatever. The point is, they're breaking in the university to go to the reserve towers. In each of the reserve towers, in the one reserve tower, it's like for everyday use, and then the other one is for like other stuff that's not really relevant. So they're really just going for the one main usage one, right? In there are these huge industrial spellographs. The one side gets used, and then every 12 hours it rotates to the other side, right? So it's on this like constant rotation. Kara and Shona are going in, and they're changing the spells that are loaded on the next batch of spellographs. They're instead going to replace these papers, or at least add to the beginning of the papers. They're going to add Shona's new spell work to make whatever this is that she's been working on forever, to load it into each machine to make this like thing happen, right? So Shona shows Kara how to do so, and then she goes up to the Archmage Supreme's office to steal the proposal plans, the spell work for the barrier expansion. So there's already proposed ideas for what to do, like the spell work that would make it happen. And then she and her mages, her fellow high mages, are proposing the how, right? They're like sourcing. They're sucking the magic to do this other magic. So she's stealing the one batch of notes, and then with her idea, with this other stuff going on, her plans, she'll be able to combine both of these spell works to like make this whole thing happen, right? So she's up there. She steals this. There's some other drama going on. And long story short, they get away with it. There's some minor hiccups, but ultimately everything goes smooth. And she and Kara are leaving the university. And she says, thank you for doing this with me, Kara. I didn't do it for you. I know. I'm just glad I didn't have to go alone. Whatever your reason for coming along, I'm thankful. Well, Kara removed her cap and unpinned her hair to let it unfurl like flames around her shoulders. I didn't get to grow up with my mom. If I had, I'd like to think that this was the kind of thing that we'd have done together. Shona let out a snort of laughter, something Kara seemed uniquely good at drawing out of her. That's your idea of a nice day out with your mother, plotting the destruction of a government? And they just have a little giggle together, and it's very, very cute. They continue walking down some streets. They're going to meet Toml down some of these side roads. The intent being it's not safe at their apartment anymore. And so one of the houses that Kara is a like chimney sweep for is for this rich woman who lives in this like pretty rich neighborhood, and she's gonna go and celebrate the like feast thing that I mentioned before, like the final day, whatever. She's like going to her son's house for the week, and so they're able to sneak into this one and stay here for a little while everything's going down. On the walk there, though, because they don't want to get on the train, and they're having conversation, her and Toml. Kara's walking ahead of them because they're just adults, you know what I mean? Like, they're lame. When you're 14, you're just, like, off doing your own thing, right? But they're talking, and she compliments the way that Toml has raised Kara and says that she's a strong young woman, and, you know, it's beautiful. Like, everything that she is and everything that she's done. It's a good thing. Like, it's a good thing how, like, confrontational that she is. No, it's not. Toml insisted. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing for a Quen to be as wild and outspoken as she is. I knew that from the beginning. I missed my family and our language too much. I couldn't bring myself to force tyrannish over the last vestige of my people, even to spare my niece a life of anger and hardship. And he says everyone knows that like assimilated Quen suffer less in this lifetime. And she's like, but it sounds like there's good reason that you couldn't bear it. And there's a good reason that wasn't what was right for her. The deities of your tribe don't just care about life and death, though. At least that's how you framed it to me. When your gods weigh the evil a man has done, they also factor in the non-lethal damage, suffering. What's your point? Just that if suffering counts as damage, is it better to be safe and broken than it is to be dead? I don't know. Toml said honestly, not for lack of contemplation, because Shona's conundrum was hardly unique. Is it better to be safe and broken or dead? This was a question every Quen had to ask themselves. She's like, well, hey, you're such a good father to her. Have you ever considered like wanting your own kids? And so his response, he says, the woman I courted before, gods, had Toml almost said before I started working for you, she wanted children. And Shona remembers and she's like, oh, the one that worked in Bringham's factory. And he's surprised that she remembered because again, Shona doesn't remember anything, right? Shona's not a talkative person. She's not a friendly person. She's not a people person. So for her to remember this detail of something that he said in passing one time kind of catches them both off guard. And he says yes. And he goes on to talk about how he had courted 2 people previously. Some of this he says out loud and some of it's just like internal for us. He had courted 2 women previously. Both of them wanted a future, and he just was so traumatized by life that he was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. The particular woman he's talking about now, she really, really wanted a baby. She wanted a family and a kid, and it just was something that he could never commit to. But also, she never really could have a kid anyway because she worked at Bringham's factory. And the dye that are used in Bringham's factories are known to cause stillbirths. And the fumes at the said factories are like very, very detrimental to the women's reproductive health. And Shona realizes in this moment that Brigham, he has prided himself for so long for being this like the textile guy. He's like supporting women. He's doing all these great things for women. She always took this as him being like, you know, like a guy for the girls. And she's realizing in this moment that his factory that employs all these women isn't about women's empowerment. It's not him supporting the Quen. It's not him supporting the gender. It's him trying to pretty much affect the birth rate of the Quen people. That has been talked about very regularly throughout the book, and I just haven't mentioned it because it's like very blasphemous and like, not blasphemous, it's just very like, it's just like racist stuff that's like very difficult to like say out loud. But throughout the book, they have all talked about how these like, how the Quen just reproduce like rabbits and they just like have a bunch of children. And she's also realizing in the same breath, right? Like while realizing the injustice and the horribleness of this, that she also worked not in his factories directly, but as a student of him, she was working with all of these same chemicals as she was doing all of the spell work and figuring out the spell work to support said factories. And so she has been exposed to all of this stuff. And so she's also dealing with the realization that if she ever did want kids, she doesn't now, but like if she did want them, she probably couldn't have them and she would be dealing with the same issues. And so while fathoming that her professor, her mentor, her, again, father figure that she's had is such a horrible person to take this choice away from these women and have this horrible impact on these women. She's also dealing with the realization that she has had the choice to be a mother taken away from her, which is a like horrifically sad idea across the board. Like the weight of the world just kind of like crashing down, right? She kind of, I guess, changes the subject a little bit or tries to support him through this, where she's like, hey, you know, if you did ever decide to be a father, like you're one of the good ones, like you're a good man, you would be a great father. And ends up revealing to him about her father being on the council and how she's just like never claimed him and he abandoned her, and they have this heart-to-heart thing as they're walking through the town. They end up in the town center where they have all of the decorations up for the deep night celebration that I mentioned. As he and Shona joined Kara beneath those mist-softened lights, Toml let himself wonder for a moment what it would be like to have a family with these two, and let that family grow. He was about to berate himself for the thought, which was as naive as it was presumptuous, until he caught Shona's gaze and had the strange feeling that she had just imagined something similar. Her cheeks were flushed, her green eyes full of affection. It was a beautiful thought for a different world that was just and kind and not about to collapse. In chapter 19, it's time for the grand reveal. It's time for the sourcing spells to be presented to the magic council people. The other people give their proposals. She goes up to give hers. And if you couldn't guess, or if you did not guess, what she ends up pulling up is a mirror, one of the mirrors that she found, right? Perfectly clear. And especially in this instance, whenever they're doing this sourcing spell, it's a comically large, tall, 3 times as big as she is, huge circle that they are displaying this imaging through. She types in her spell work, shows the crystal clear black and white, takes off the color, shows it clear as day like a TV thing in front of these people, and shows them what's going on. And then she goes on her tirade. That sounds disrespectful, but you know what I mean. Talking about how this is where we get our magic from, and this is what the truth is. She's like, this is what this means. This is where we get it from. I can't believe we would ever do this. And you're all complicit. They're like, oh my God, stop. What are you doing? She goes on to siphon something in front of them and ranting back and forth. And there's a bunch of commotion and pushback, and they're telling her to knock it off, or she's going to be under arrest for blasphemy. She keeps going. At the stroke of noon, everything cuts to black. When the lights flicker back on, there's mirrors everywhere across the entire city. Anytime any magic gets used, one of her Freynin mirrors, which is her signature mirror thing, will pop up next to the energy source, and it will show the people what is being killed to support that magic. The entire city, all of a sudden, every light switch automatically shows a little picture about what thing is being killed to turn on that light. The entirety of the magic, the dome that is constantly being farmed for magic to keep it there and keep it protected, every single square of the dome is filled with an image of something being obliterated by the blight to support that piece. Mass chaos. People in this room are fainting, they're vomiting, they're angry, they're being shown these horrific images. In the city, you can just hear it right there in the university. You can just hear the city howling in pain and screams and suffering of seeing all of this that's happening. In chapter 20, she's arrested. She's thrown into the back of a car, and as they're driving, it just keeps popping up, pretty much in the driver's, on the dashboard, right in front of the driver, is the images of all of the things that are being killed to power the engine. He ends up getting into a car accident and crashing into the side of the road, and she passes out because she hits her head really hard on the bar. And she comes to, and she's alone in a windowless cell, smelling vaguely of mold. She pressed an ear to the wall and strained to hear what was unfolding on the streets below. She had set the Freynin mirrors to last only half an hour, meaning the images of the Quen should have faded shortly after she entered the jail, and she had assumed that the chaos would fade with them. The people of Tyrion would settle down to digest what they had seen. But she had never been adept at predicting humans the way that she was at anticipating abstract blobs of energy. There was no settling. If anything, the shouts intensified in the absence of her mirrors. No longer as shrill, but just as frantic. She couldn't make out words, but one thing was clear from within her cell. The unrest had just begun. So she's sitting here freaking out. This is like the first time that she has ever been alone with her thoughts for so long, without paper, without a spellograph, without something to like keep her hands and mind busy. And so she is just like hearing the screaming outside and the yelling and smelling the smoke on the air and everything that's going on. And eventually her cousin Alba comes to visit her. And Alba is like, what did you do? Like, the Quen are rioting, you idiot. They're looting. They're tearing down everything that they can. God, the Quen. Shona hadn't stopped to think about how they would react. Even when Toml had tried to make her think about it, her mind had slid past the thought. Of course the Quen would be more stricken than anyone, more furious. And so Alba goes on this entire thing about like, what have you done? Why would you do this? You showed all of these people these horrible things. You just traumatized everybody. And she's like, Alba, people have been dying this entire time. She says, then they've been dying for good reason. Again, like very, very heated exchange with her cousin. And eventually the cousin is like, since when do you care about other people? Why do you care if people are dying for this? Since when have you ever cared about the work that Mama and I have put in for you? And now other people matter? Now that they're in the way of you getting attention for your magic? That's not why I did this. I did this to help people. How is this helping anyone? The Quen have all gone mad and turned into animals. And what about your people, Shona? What about the people who loved you when no one else would? Who sacrificed everything so that you could have your unmarried, intellectual life exactly the way that you wanted? How could you do this to us? You don't even care, do you? That they're attacking everything that we've built, everything that they are? It's not an attack on the truth, Shona protested. Tyrion is built on truth. Our religion is built on truth. What's more important than holding that, than upholding that? Your family is more important than that. Tyrion is more important than that. And she goes on to tell her that they are literally like destroying the city, like rioting, looting, the like burning places down. Like it is like horrible, like across the board with everything that's like going on. Eventually Shona says, I'm the one who saw the truth and I didn't look away. We can't just like hide from this truth and these things. Alba stopped pacing, her eyes narrowed in a terrible expression that Shona had never seen before. And there it is. That's what this is really about. No matter how much you try to deny it, all of this, it's about you being the smartest, the best, the chosen one, all this agony for your goddamn ego. Shona could have shrugged the words off from anybody else, but not Alba. Not Alba, who had always told her that she was a good person when no one else believed it. Not Alba, who had pulled her from that window ledge and held her tight until she found the will to live. Alba's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. I always knew you were selfish, Shona. I was always fine with that. Because what was the harm? But this, the founding mages gave you this city. Mama gave you a home. The archmages gave you opportunities that no woman has ever enjoyed in the history of our nation, and this is what you do with it? I can't believe that I ever called you my family. When the Quen burn Tyrion to the ground, it will be your fault. Congratulations on making your mark. And Alba storms out and slams the door behind her. She didn't realize that she had started reeling back until she hit the wall. She was crying, but there was an emptiness to these tears. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, crying had become like a reflex. Her body trying to prove that she was still human when everything that made her human was gone. She had already lost her dream, her career, her reason for living. Why not her family too? As she sobbed for the loss of Alba and Aunt Winnie, an even darker thought threaded its way through the tears. That slap across her face had all but confirmed her worst fear. Toml was right. Shona had miscalculated. Because if Alba, kind, giving, infinitely patient Alba, met the truth with violent denial, what chance did the rest of Tyrion have? Eventually, she gets let out of the cell because they're telling her, hey, there's no more room in the jails. So many of the Quen are being arrested for everything that's going on out there, so we have to put you on house arrest. And in the middle of her saying that she can't return home, that her aunt has disowned her, that she has nowhere to go, she runs into Brigham. Brigham is the one that has come to collect her, that gave the idea for house arrest, so that she can face a appropriate trial the next day for her crimes. And she's realizing and commenting to him that this was your idea, wasn't it, for house arrest? If it was up to them, they just would have thrown me to the Quen to die. And he doesn't necessarily confirm it, but he says, I couldn't let you go out that way. So he gets her. He's walking her from the prison to this pickup location. The prison's protected by an additional magical barrier, But the second that they step out, there's a bunch of Quen around, and they notice them because they're wearing their white robes, and they're like, it's the mages, like, let's attack them. They go over. Brigham has brought his staff, which is the first time that he has ever brought this, but all of the mages are required to know how to yield like protective magic and pretty much be able to fight with their magic for these, like, literally for these exact instances. They have to practice this, like, using magic as a weapon all the time. And that's exactly what he does. And she bears witness to this, how these Quen are trying to attack them, and how he, like, you know, hits his staff on the ground and causes lightning, or like pushes people back with crazy wind, and ends up like breaking people's bodies and like pretty much like murdering people in front of her to protect her. And so she's having this like really contradicting feelings inside of her about being grateful for his protection, but also wishing that he wasn't being so violent, but also wishing that the Quen weren't attacking her, but also understanding where their pain is coming from. She's just in this like really, really weird place, right? Eventually, one of the other high mages has some like crazy magical car and comes and like picks them up, and they get in, and then he takes them to Brigham's house. And so as they're driving through the city, or like hovering, it's kind of like a hover car. There's some crazy stuff going on. As he's going through the city, though, she's looking down and she's seeing the chaos, the flames, the smoke, the people, everything that's going on. I did this, she thought, as she watched figures smashing storefront windows in the dark, horror tangled with thrill in the pit of her stomach. I did all of this. That little tingle of a thrill reminded her that she was not blameless, like so many of the people taking to the streets or cowering in their homes. Some fundamental part of her was like Renthorn III, a creature of ego and hunger whose personal glory had been more important to her than any of the lives that she destroyed. They're getting closer to the mansion, and she realized it was no spell, but the sun over the far hills making its final appearance for the next 2 months. This was the last day of Farron's feast, what would have been a time of community, during which people reaffirmed their faith and their bonds with one another, had turned into a citywide riot. In minutes, the sun would set, and who could say if Tyrion would be standing when it rose again? In chapter 21, she is at Brigham's house, and he is confronting her with everything. Coming to the realization of, like, you could have been great. You could have changed things for all women in Tyrion for centuries to come, and instead you'll be the reason that the council will never let a female near the order again. Maybe I'm a fool, and maybe they were right. Like, maybe this wasn't cut out for women. And he's like, they will wipe you from history. Everything that you have done thus far, this mark that you have left on this city, they rewrite the history books. They control the history that is noted. Do you not understand that? There will be no trace of you at all, which could possibly be the most hurtful thing that could come out of this for somebody with such an ego. And they continue talking, and he's just sounding so heartbroken about all of it. Shona frowned, because how did a man with no heart sound so sad? How dare he sound so sad? I would hope that you would understand this, if nothing else, my dear Freynan. Brigham said softly, I never helped you for the glory. I did it because it was the right thing to do. The right thing to do? And so then she goes on the entire rant about these factories destroying these women, and how he has, like, deep in your soul, no matter what lies you spin around it, you know what you've done to these, like, countless number of women, and I'm your recompense. I'm supposed to clean the slate for you so that you could sit here and be proud for what you've done for women, even though you've destroyed so many. You just want to feel better about having that title of the leading employer of women. You don't care. You just need me to feel better about yourself. And she goes on to even say it as much as, like, you've destroyed these people to bring on your own success, and by extension, mine, at the cost of women's lives, their health, their ability to have children. Mine included. Like, how could you do this? And he says, you were never going to have children. Why is this issue suddenly so close to your heart? Because now Shona had held Kara close to her heart. Because she had seen the shattered look on Toml's face as he told her why he could not be a father. For Shona and Brigham, it had been a choice secured by taking the same choice away from many others. And so he's like, hey, obviously you're going to get tried tomorrow. Just tell them that you apologize. Tell them that you learned, and, like, everything's going to be okay, and it was just a mistake, and, like, blah, blah, blah. And she says, you want me to throw away my honesty in exchange for my life? He says, you must. And she says, no, I won't. And so he says, okay, well, like, if you're not going to do that, if you know for a fact that you're going to walk into the court tomorrow and you are going to die, do you at least want to write a letter, like, to your aunt and to your cousin? I won't let you use this pen because you could use this as, like, a conduit and you could hurt me with it. But I'm going to write you a letter. You tell me what you want to say. And so she's thinking about all of these things that she could say, and she goes on this like very, very emotional spiel talking about it. And then at the end she says, I won't apologize for what I did at the High Magistracy, but I will apologize for the way I took you for granted. Brigham pauses in writing, and he says, you don't apologize for what you did, not even for her sake, for the woman that raised you. She says, I think it's important to be honest with the people you care about. But tell her I am truly sorry for any pain my work has caused her. I know the sacrifices she made for me. I've always been grateful for them, even though I've been bad at showing it. I'll still be grateful for her in hell. That might be the hardest sentence I've ever heard in my entire life. I will still be grateful for her in hell. That is craziness, dude. So eventually, like, he has a magic barrier around his house. That's why nobody has, like, gotten in. And then the magic barrier broke down, but he still had these, like, big fences. And then the Quen ended up breaking down the fence. And then now they're, like, at the doorsteps, like, about to, try and break into the house. And so he goes out onto the balcony, tells her to stay where she is, and she follows anyway because she wants to break this facade that he has, this mask, this like super kindness that he's showing. Because through all of this entire night, he has just been a gentleman and kind and sweet and soft and patient. And she's like, this is not who he is. He's a monster. Everything that he's done, everything he said, there's a monster underneath here, and I need to see it. I need to see this like mask falter. And so she does. She finally breaks it to the point that he grabs her with the Archmage's hands on her, pretending gentleness but gripping hard enough to bruise. Shona saw something clearly for the first time. A structure she had glimpsed in pieces her whole life, but never perceived in totality. She saw Tyrion, not as the good place scattered with desperate injustices, but as the single hideous machine Toml had tried to describe to her. Here, in Brigham's grip, was the cage that kept women in, made them feel fearful, made them small. Here, in his imposing figure, was the barrier that kept Quen from plenty, siphoned their lives, and starved them into ravenous hordes. The trick was that the cage and the barrier weren't different structures. They were components of the same machine, cast and forged for the same ultimate purpose. Quen were dangerous beasts when it meant tightening control over tyrannish women. Tyrannish women were damsels when it meant tightening control over Quen. They were all hapless children when it meant denying them access to power, and it was that lack of power that made them hapless, made them monstrous, made them subject to the benevolent tyrannish man who would save them from their deficiencies. Each gear turned tidily into its neighbor, into a soul-grinding system designed to sustain the men who had named the pieces and made them so. Damsel, devil, servant, wife. Brigham throws her to the ground after she keeps fighting back, and she's in the process of passing out, and this was the reality behind Brigham's mask, and it could not be forgiven, just as Shona could not be forgiven. Even Toml, she decided, who could never forgive her for what was happening now. The notion made her smile even as tears leaked from her eyes onto the cold balcony under her cheek, and her vision blurred. If nothing else, maybe the horrors of this night would help Toml make up his mind about her final proposal. It was a slim chance, but a comfort nonetheless as the blur grew and she slipped into unconsciousness. Maybe she would leave her mark on Tyrion yet. The next morning, they get picked up, and she, Brigham, and the mage who's driving go to the, high magistracy court thingy-majiggy in order to, try her for what's going on. All of the high mages are there. The archmages are there. The city council is there. There's a handful of people missing. Renthorn is one of them, which is kind of weird, but she greets everyone. Archmages. She nodded to the council. And then to Paramus. Father, she says. Because she said, if I'm going out in a blaze of glory and drama. They're going to figure out that that's my dad. Let this haunt Paramus to the end of his career and beyond. His disowned child had brought about a near collapse of Tyrion. No politician, no matter how rich or smooth-talking, was going to recover from such a shame. So Renthorn and then Mordra, the one that she was like, are you a good man? You need to get out of here. They're the two high mages that are missing. And she realizes, you guys can't vote. You have to get 100 votes, a consensus of death for me. You can't make any decisions without them. The Mage Supreme is well, they're not here, but their fathers are, and they're grandfathered in to be able to answer for their sons, or some dumb stuff like that. And it's pretty much like a 5-second trial, right? They tell her what her charges are, she zones out of it, and then at the end of it, he says, do you have anything to say in your defense before we make our judgment? I do. As all of you on the council are aware, I fabricated nothing. I have presented myself and my work truthfully throughout all appearances in this hall. You still have a chance to do the right and honest thing before God. She said this part without her heart behind it because she had promised herself that she would. For Toml, Kara, and all of the Caldone, for the other tribes, for the black-haired woman at the edge of the ocean, for Kadeli and her baby who had never gotten to draw a breath. Kadeli was Toml's ex. She had to try to make the council change their minds. Whether or not you decide to execute me today, I hope that you use my mapping spells. I beg you, use what is now public knowledge of the other realm to siphon matter and energy without harming anyone. You will still have the Freynin mirror spell I wrote for you for the presentation. You can use that as the basis of a more truthful, more compassionate Tyran. A Tyran that embodies its ideals instead of pretending them. She's dismissed while they make their deliberations. With death so close, was it even worth trying to mitigate that poison at the center of her being? If God had judgment for her, it was surely already made. And so she's like trying to convince herself to not feel sad and guilty and bad about everything that's happened, because like, what's the point? Leaning her head back against the wall, Shona smiled bitterly, looking at the mural that loomed over the chamber. Leon recounting his visions, while Stravos and Fane listened adoringly at his feet. At least she would spend eternity in the company of her heroes. Oh my god, that's crazy! Because they're in hell, and she's going to hell, and so she gets to hang out with her heroes? Oh my god, Jesus Christ. So she goes back into the chamber. They've made their deliberation. The vote has been unanimous. She's sentenced to death. In front of her is a desk containing a vial, and it's the exact same death that the traitor mage had suffered from. You take this like little shot glass basically of this potion that makes your entire body go numb, and you go into this like forever sleep, and then they kill you. She goes up to the desk. She takes the medicine. In front of her is the Bible, so that you can spend your last moments like repenting and looking through their equivalent of a Bible, you know what I mean? Their religious text. Knowing these are your last few moments alive, do you have any final words for your family or for the council? Shona closed her eyes and drew in a breath to speak, wondering how long she could hold these last precious moments of consciousness. That was when she heard the rumbling above. Faint but growing louder in the waiting silence, her eyes snapped open. Toml. God bless Toml. He had hated or loved Shona enough to finish her last spell. The laugh started low in Shona's stomach and slowly grew to shake her whole body. Something amuses you, Miss Freynin? The supreme mage had demanded. Shona didn't answer. She didn't have to. All around, shaking had intensified as a historically massive spell roared into action. What is that? Archmage Duras had asked. That is my final word, Archmage, Shona said as God's light ignited Leon's hall. In chapter 22, we're in Toml's perspective. The last spell that he had asked her to do was to use the forbidden coordinates to gather all of the energy out of like the city center, like the magic center thing where they're at for this court thing, is to use the forbidden coordinates to siphon energy out of the hall to make the barrier expand. And Toml is remembering when he had asked her to do this, and it was the night that they were walking after everything that happened in the university, right? Literally, like, the night before everything went sideways when the Freyan mirrors happened. She had came with them to the house that they were staying at. And also, just to note, that was the other reason they, like, didn't use the train or didn't use anything and walked, because they didn't want to use any electricity and cause any more death. So even in this instance, they were using, like, water collected from a stream, and they were using, like, candles and stuff to do everything. Like, they were completely avoiding using any type of magic. Anyway, so they're at this house, and she's explaining this to him and what her grand plan is and really breaking it down, and he keeps refusing about, like, I can't do that to you. And she says, I really can't ask you to do this, can I? She said softly. Toml shook his head. Shona's little fists had clenched at her sides, her fingers squirming against one another. I'm still gonna leave the spellograph here in case you change your mind, but I want you to know that whatever you decide, it's all right. It's strange, isn't it? I realized your soul matters to me. Whatever weighing system the gods employ in the next life, you matter to me. What? If I'm gonna die, I want to go knowing that I left you safe and right with yourself, even if that means you ruin your legacy. If it means you die a footnote in your own history. Yeah, isn't that odd? I've never cared about anyone that way, more than I cared about my own work. I think you're overtired. Toml said. You should get some sleep before the presentation. I can walk you back to the train station. No. Shona knit her fingers together and looked up at Toml, seeming suddenly self-conscious. That is, I thought I wouldn't go to the station tonight. What do you mean? I mean, if this is the last night of the world as we know it, I want to spend it with someone who can appreciate that with me. I want to spend it with you, if that's all right. And he's like, don't stay here if you think you can talk me into going along with your plan. Like, that's, blah, blah, blah. And she pushes back and he pushes back. And then she's like, okay, fine, I'll leave. This is better, actually. This way we leave off with a little hope. Yeah? Until next time, Toml. She turns to leave, and the lamplight caught Shona's tousled hair, casting a soft halo about her. In that moment, time collapsed, and Toml was looking at his sister, his father, and the whole of his clan again, knowing that all this hope was doomed. There would not be a next time. Before Shona's hand had reached the doorknob, he caught it and pulled her into a kiss. They kiss a couple more times, and he pulls away and he says, whatever comes next, however history remembers High Mage Shona Freynin, I want to remember her this way, up on her toes, luminous with hope so powerful it verged on mania. If he was to survive this ordeal to come, he needed to remember this irrepressible energy that death and better judgment could not contain. And so they're on the roof. They're on the roof of their apartment complex because it's like the best place to get the reception or whatever. He's up there with the spellograph. Kara comes up there with him. He has everything typed and ready to go, and he has the radio going to listen to the trial because it's being broadcast. And they've made their decision. So he turns to Kara and he's like, Kara, what do you want to do? And she's like, why are you asking me? I'm just a child. And he's like, that's exactly why I'm asking you. It's your future. What do you think that we should do? And she says it's what she wants. Kara said softly, but with certainty beyond her years. You understand that, right? She wants to die, sticking it to those men. How would you know? Trust me, uncle, it's a girl thing. Which, God said earlier, I didn't quote it earlier and I really regret it because it doesn't hit quite as hard. Whenever they were, in the apartment and it was just Kara and Shona talking, Shona tried to, relate to her about, it's a girl thing. About, how men suck pretty much and, kind of cracking jokes a little bit. And it was, the first of their, kind of semi-bonding moments. And so to say it's a girl thing, eyes shut, against tears he prayed, as if the god of the hunt could hear a lost son so far from the plains. I take that I might live. I take that one day I might give back. And he hits the siphoning key. And then that's what started happening, was all of the siphoning at the building. And so they're up here and they're watching this, whole consuming white light just, siphon out of Leon's hall at the university. And it's, going straight up into the barrier, and they start to see the barrier expanding in the distance. And it's beautiful and it's violent and it's craziness. And we cut back into Shona's POV. She's watching everything happening, right? She's paralyzed though, right? She took the stuff already, so she can't feel her body. She can't react to anything, but she's still there enough to witness what's going on. And she sees the blight consuming people, destroying people in front of her. And she sees the true human nature of these horrible people as they're shoving each other to get away and scrambling away and cursing and screaming and this horrible ending to these lives. Shona's only distinction among these mages was she was a more honest monster than any of them. And she would die an honest mage of Tyrion, finely dressed and filthy souled, taking with arrogance what was not hers to take. Her last thought was the itch of a question. Had Toml done this because he loved her? Or because he hated her? But then, no, she decided. As her blood and being blurred into white light, she hoped this hadn't been about her at all. She hoped that Toml had looked inward and found his own peace, his own reasons for moving forward. Kara, too, and Aunt Winnie, and Alba. She hoped they all pushed through this horror to better things. With her soul in the spiral on its way to hell, Shona's last thought was not of vengeance or legacy, it was love. In chapter 23, the very final chapter of the book, we're back to Toml and Kara. And they knew that the second that they hit the button, their fates were sealed. Because it would trigger it would be notified that the spellograph had been used. And then also, obviously, Shona didn't do that by herself. And so he, being her assistant, would be the first suspect of what was going on. And so they're immediately packing and they're going to make a run for it. The plan is that they're going to run past the new barrier expansion, out of the barrier, and into the caves in the mountains, and they're going to try and hide there. Because the idea being, with all of the power like being sucked up and all of the siphoning from the Great Hall happening, that the siphoning zone, like the reserve zone, won't be going on for a couple of minutes while like all of the other energy is still being pulled, and that is happening. And so there's this very, very small window that they have to escape the city, run through the barrier, run through the siphoning reserve zone before the blight comes back, before the blight returns, and then, you know, the normal crazy stuff, right? As they're packing, or on the rooftop of this apartment complex, Renthorn appears. Mordra, the other high mage, appears. Renthorn confronts him, and he's like, how did she do this? Like, what's going on? Like, you have to tell me, like, give me the spellograph. He plays dumb. Kara was able to grab the spellograph in its little suitcase and make a run for it. And so he's just trying to waste as much time as he can. He'll take whatever, like, torture and everything that Renthorn is threatening if it means that Kara can get away. It's a very drawn out thing. Turns out Kara stayed on the roof. She had actually, like, climbed the little water tower above them. She, like, jumps down and, like, smashes Renthorn's head in with the spellograph. So he's gone now. So now it's Mordra. He's the only remaining high mage. The only remaining mage, the highest ranking now in this entire city. He's like the only guy left. He says, this feeling is energy. Toml pressed a hand to Mordra's chest. Remember this day you lost your friends and family to tyrannish magic. Remember all this grief and terror and try to do something good with it. Swear by your god and I'll let you live. Why won't you kill me? Toml answered in quiet honesty. I watched a woman run herself to death on the belief that there was some good in the high magistry. She did her best to leave some hope in the world, for your people and mine. I never, even at the end, I never shared her optimism, but in her honor, this once, I'm going to try. And so they make a run for it. Him and Kara go down and they make a run for it. But because of all the rioting and everything that's going on, they're pretty much under like a curfew. They're breaking curfew currently. He's about to get beat up in this like alleyway, and this guard's about to kill him. And these other Quen come by. They help him, and then he looks past them and he realizes that there's an entire like group of them, and they're all making a run for the barrier as well. They're like, we don't know what craziness is happening right now, but come with us. Like, let's all go together if you're going the same way. They found a new family. And so all of them are making a run for it to get out of this godforsaken city with these like terrible people. And he's talking to one of the guys as they're running, and he's like, do you have any experience in the mountains or hunting or anything? And the one guy's like, yeah, a little bit. What about you? And he's like, yeah, a little bit. And there's going to be some hope. They keep running, and some of the guards are starting to shoot at them, and this one lady that is carrying a baby gets shot. Kara immediately reaches over and grabs the kid. I've got him. She took the child from the woman's arms and clutched him to her bloodstained chest. Don't worry, auntie, I've got him. Instantly calling her auntie, I love. That's like so incredibly sweet to me. And then also, and it's so reminiscent of like Toml carrying her into the city, and then now she's carrying another baby out of the city, right? And so the husband ends up picking up the wife that got shot and like carrying her, and they like keep running and it's fine. And then the bullets stopped working from the guards. Toml knew why, but there was hardly time to explain. If the guns had stopped working, it was because the barrier expansion spell had burned through all life inside the Magicenter and moved down the subsequent branches of Shona's spell web to tap parts of the reserve, including the energy pool designated for firearms. It meant everyone in Leon's Hall was dead. Realizing what the absence of gunfire meant, Kara turned to look at Toml in pain and concern. If there had been any sliver of doubt, it was certain now. Shona was gone. Toml met Kara's raw silver eyes and repeated the chorus around him, "Don't look back." The wave of Quen had reached the former edge of the city, marked only by a line where thick grass met sodden brown. The moment Toml crossed onto the brown, bones crunched underfoot. Layers of them. Some fresh and strung with wet vestiges of muscle. Some brittle with age, turning to dust beneath the hundreds of feet pelting out of the city. These people, or their parents, or their grandparents, had all crossed into Tiran separately with different hopes for what the city might hold. They were one now, bound by the sorrow of the crossing and a will to live that could outlast all Tiran's machinery. One tribe, one purpose. Shona had said that all emotion, fear, anger, sadness, were just energy, equal in their potential power, but Toml found himself disagreeing as more and more Quen fell into step around him. There was greater power in him now than there had been during his first crossing, when he had run in fear. For the first time in his life, he grasped at the force that had kept his sister moving, pulling her family onward with her through all the loss. For the first time, he ran the way his sister had, not from oblivion, but toward a hope bigger than himself. Toml had always understood that it wasn't Kara alone that he had borne across the lake 10 years ago. Now he understood that it hadn't been the Caldone either. We are one people with one purpose, his tribe leader had said. But we was more than the Caldone. More than any coalition of tribes. It was his brother-in-law pushing his sister a little further than he had gone. His sister pushing him a little farther than she had gone. Toml pushing Kara a little farther than he expected to go. Even Shona Freynin, giving her life to push them both a little farther still. Maybe, like so many of the people he had loved, Toml wouldn't live to see the dawn. Maybe Kara wouldn't. Maybe it would be 100 generations before the sun rose on a life of dignity for their descendants, but the worthwhile run was not the sprint. And they get through the barrier, and Kara yelps because it's like so cold. And it's the first time that Toml breathes in fresh air, and the cold, icy air like stings his lungs, but it's the first time that he has tasted home in like 10 years. And that's how the book ends, and I think that's really fucked up. I think that's like really messed up, actually. Oh my god. It's such a good book. It's such a good book. I think like also mostly because like we just read the Lizard Man like alien romance and this whole like white savior thing of this like, you know, person saving the like downtrodden in whatever capacity that means. And as much as maybe you kind of expected that to be what happened in this book, like that was kind of the precursor or the setup or the belief or whatever. And that's what Shona thought that she would be, that she would be able to change the world. And she didn't, and she couldn't. And that's not what happened. She still sacrificed her like life though to make things a little bit better, to make some kind of change. Not the one that she hoped and not nearly as great or what anybody expected, but it was something. And it didn't have this like crazy happy ending. I mean, I guess it did, but I don't know. It brought the Quen people together so that they could try to have a better life and do things differently and like get out of there, that maybe they wouldn't have had that push or the motivation or the whatever to do so otherwise. I don't know, man. That's crazy. That's such a crazy good book. I love it so much. I'm so glad I got to talk about it again. I hope you guys liked it. I don't know. This was like so much different than a normal rant review, and I feel like I completely derailed so much, but oh my god. Yeah, I hope you read it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know your thoughts. I don't think I have anything else to say. Channel-wise, I think next week I'm going to end up doing like a bad, like dark romance book. I haven't done one in a while, and I know you people like to see me suffer. So I have to do one of those here pretty soon. I don't know what though. Probably a Penelope Douglas. I was going to do Corrupt by Penelope Douglas, but Rachel Oates literally just posted one today as I'm filming, which I love her so much. I'm glad that she did it, and that's like right up her alley, and I'm not surprised at all. And she does reviews a lot differently than I do. She definitely deep dives a lot more, but still, now I'm like, dang it, I can't really do that one. It feels weird now, but I might do something by Penelope Douglas. I have had a couple people request Trist 6 Venom or something. It's like a lesbian one, but also still a bad dark romance by Penelope Douglas, so it can't be that great. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, you guys will know. I'll have the poll up sometime, I don't know, whenever, sometime soon. If you go onto my little profile thingy, you should see it. Maybe? I don't know. Unless you're a nerd and you watch these videos really early. In which case, I love you. Thank you so much for the support. But you know what I mean. Oh, I'm just wrecked from that book, man. Okay. I'm gonna get going, though. I will see you in the next one. Bye.